Thank you, Jerry. Great to be with you. Thank you very much. I know how challenging it is for you living in Cleveland to come out on a beautiful summer evening like this when you could be outside, and I appreciate you doing that. I guess I haven't been in Cleveland for quite a while because it's beautiful out there. You have done a terrific job with this city. You really have. With a lot of cities with the downtown just disintegrating, you've done a wonderful job, so congratulations on that. I was in New York on Saturday, so I had to make a choice. Should I stay Sunday in New York and come to Cleveland late Sunday night, or should I take an early morning flight and be here? And I'm so glad I took the early morning flight. It gave me a chance to go out and see the tall ships, which I thought were terrific, the harbor, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, wonderful. Congratulations on what you've done with this city. Let me tell you what I think is one of the most interesting things that I have uncovered about negotiating in the 22 years now that I've been writing and talking about it. And that is that negotiating skills don't change as the negotiation gets bigger or more important. The same fundamental skills always apply. Something that you may learn this evening that tomorrow or next week will get you a little better price from a customer or save you from having to give away some terms or delivery prices. A year or two from now, you may be involved in a multi-million-dollar merger or acquisition of another company. The same fundamental skills would apply. Even if you were involved in international arms control talks, the same fundamental skills apply. It's the most basic set of personal skills you'll ever develop. And once you develop it, you'll be using it in every area of your life. I find that fascinating because what it means is that once you've got the fundamentals down, then every time you turn on the television or open up the newspaper and see one of these high-profile negotiations going on, you'll know what the negotiators are doing, you'll know why they're doing it, and it becomes a continuing learning process for you. For example, you would immediately understand that the Middle East is in chaos because Ehud Barak, the former prime minister of Israel, made a fundamental negotiating mistake in dealing with Yasser Arafat. And I bet it's a mistake that we have all made in business at one time or another. We have been so eager to put a deal together that we have thought, I'm going to make this so good that the customer will not be able to say no to me. So Ehud Barak went to Yasser Arafat and said, here's what we'll do. We'll let you have your own nation, we'll give you East Jerusalem for your capital, and we'll give you back 97% of the land that we captured during the war. Now that was a deal that was so good that Yasser Arafat should have said, wow, I can't believe you're willing to do all that. That's fantastic. We'll take it. Thank you very much. That's what he should have done. But as you know from business, that's not always what happens, is it? Sometimes you make a deal so good that the buyer thinks, wow, I got them to give me this much. I wonder how much more I can get them to give me, and the whole thing turns into chaos. So I thought I'd start out this evening by talking about a couple of international incidents, things that you read about in the newspaper at the time. And let's see what we can abstract from that and apply to your day-to-day sales negotiations. Let's go back to November 1994 in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. We had former President Carter sitting down with General Cedros to negotiate the return of democracy to Haiti or get the dictator out, depending on your point of view. The phone rang, and it was President Clinton saying, I have already started the invasion. You have 30 minutes to wrap up the negotiation and get out of there. Now, that's extreme time pressure on a negotiation, right? Extreme time pressure. And you all know that under time pressure, people become flexible. If that buyer wants what you've got and they've got to have it right now, price will not be the issue that it would be if they were working 6 months ahead of their needs curve. If you're buying something and you've got to have it right now, chances are you'll pay more for it than you would if you were 6 months ahead of your needs curve. Well, your children know about time pressure, don't they? When do they ask you for something? Just at the last minute, right? Just as you're racing out or they're racing out, that's when they know they have the best chance of getting something. Sometimes my younger son, John, would drive me over to Los Angeles Airport. That's about an hour's drive for us. And we don't talk about anything of consequence on the way over there until we get curbside. And the skycap's got the luggage on the cart. I'm about to race off and try and catch that plane. And I hear him saying, Dad, I'm sorry I forgot. I need $50 to fix the muffler on my car. And I say, John, don't do this to me. I teach this stuff. How come it didn't come up before? And he says, well, Dad, I'm sorry I forgot, but I've got to fix a ticket on the car. I've got to get it done before you get back from the trip. Let me have the money now. I'll explain it when you get back. Instinctively, they understand that under time pressure, you become flexible. So here in Haiti with this phone call, we all of a sudden had enormous time pressure on this negotiation. The problem was President Clinton was putting time pressure on the wrong side. When you have all the power in a negotiation, you don't put time pressure on your own ambassador. It caused Carter to give away things like agreeing to rent the general's houses and other things that he didn't have to do. You put time pressure on the other side. Now, here's a key point about negotiating, and I think this is the most important thing to learn, to understand, and know how to apply when you're negotiating. We didn't have the power in Haiti because we had the larger army. We had the power in Haiti because we had the most options. Options give you power. We didn't have to do a thing. We didn't have to invade, but we had very effectively limited General Cedrus's options to just 1 or 2 countries around the world who would even take him in exile. He now runs a graphic arts business out of his apartment in Panama City. That's the best he could do out of that negotiation because we had so severely restricted his options. So if you can convince the other person that the result of this negotiation is not that critical to you because you have all of these options available to you, that gives you power in a negotiation. If at the same time you can limit the other person's perception of the options that they have, which you do by positioning yourself in the marketplace as different than everybody else. Oh, sure, there are lots of other people in this business who could sell you this, but nobody has the sales, service, and repair backup that we do. We are unique. Nobody does it the way we do it. That limits the perception of the options that the buyer has. Then you have power coming at you from the other side. So the buyer's job in a negotiation is to convince you that they have options. That, well, they've got 6 other people who will all sell it to them at a lower price than you do. That is just their job in the negotiation. It doesn't mean it's true. It's just that they've learned a thing or two about negotiating, and they know if they can convince you that they have options, that makes you vulnerable in the negotiation. Your job is to convince the buyer that your sales and service are unique, that nobody else can match what you do, and then you have the power in a negotiation. Let's talk about another international incident, and let's talk about the hostages being held in Beirut. One of them for 6.5 years. Pérez de Cuellar, the UN Secretary General who got them out, would tell you that he got them out because he knew how to downplay the importance of the bargaining chip. He was finally able to convince those hostage takers that they didn't hold a very good bargaining chip there. We cared about these people, but we had warned them of the danger. We didn't care enough to change our policy on hostage taking, which is a very sensitive position to advance when people's lives are at stake. You will recall that President Carter did exactly the opposite. When he had the hostages in the Tehran embassy, he made it the focal point of his administration. He came right out and said, nothing is more important to me than getting these hostages out. I'm not going to leave Washington until we do. That is about the worst thing you can do in a negotiation. Just about the worst thing you can do is to let the other side know how much you care. I thought President Bush did an excellent job of getting our spy plane back from China. Remember that incident? We hit one of their planes and now we're on the ground. And George Bush is saying, well, you know, we'd like to get the plane back, but it's not that critical because we destroyed all the sensitive information and equipment on the way down. Oh, right, sure they did. They hit another plane in midair. They went into a spin. They had about 2 minutes before they were going to hit the ocean, and they were back there destroying the sensitive information and equipment? I don't think so. I think we desperately needed to get that plane back. That's not the way to negotiate, is it? Let the other side know how little you care, and you do a lot better in a negotiation. The hostage who was held longest in Beirut was Terry Anderson, the Associated Press bureau chief, held hostage for 6.5 years. He has a sister whose name is Peggy Say. And Peggy Say, financed by Associated Press, who should have known better, waged a battle for 6.5 years that we would never forget that her brother was being held hostage in Beirut. And everybody was saying, wasn't that wonderful? If you were being held hostage, wouldn't you love to have a sister like Peggy Say? Not me. I think it's very significant that he was the last prisoner released. I think she delayed his release by 2 years doing what she did. They probably didn't know why Terry Anderson was so important to us. All they knew was every time they opened up an American newspaper, here was Terry Anderson's picture on the front page. Don't let the other side know how much you care, and you do a lot better in a negotiation. So what I've been saying here is that negotiating skills are the same at any level of the game. The fundamental skills always apply. It's the most basic set of skill sets you'll ever develop. And once you do, you'll be using it in every area of your life. Okay, now let's talk about some basic negotiating tactics, beginning negotiating gambits. A gambit is a chess turn that means any maneuver for advantage. If you play chess, you know there are beginning gambits to get the game started in your direction, then there are middle gambits to keep the momentum going, and then there are ending gambits when you get ready to checkmate the other person, or in business parlance, close the sale. These are the beginning negotiating gambits, the things you do in the early stages to be sure you're setting it out for a successful conclusion. Here's rule number one. Never jump at the first proposal, however good it looks. Because if you say yes to the first proposal, it automatically triggers two thoughts in the other person's mind. And those thoughts are so automatic, I'm going to have you tell me what they are. Let's say that you're thinking of buying a second car, and the people down the street have one for sale, and they're asking, let's say, $10,000 for it. At that, it is a terrific buy. There's not a thing wrong with the price. You can't wait to get down there and snap it up before somebody else beats you to it. But on the way down there, you start thinking to yourself, well, I'll be a good negotiator. Just to see what happens, I'll make them a super low offer. I'll offer them $8,000 for the car. Now, I know I'm not going to get it for that, but maybe we'll end up splitting the difference. It'll be an even better buy. Now, I want you to relate that to a buyer that you're about to close this sale with them. And they have already made the decision to do business with you. They've gone through all of the discussions. That decision has been made. They're going to do business with you. But at the last minute, the buyer is thinking, well, why don't I just make them a super low offer just to see what happens? So you sit down with the husband and wife that own the automobile. You present your $8,000 offer. You're waiting for them to explode with rage at such a low offer. What actually happens is one looks at the other and says, well, what do you think, dear? And the other one says, oh, let's go ahead and sell it and get rid of it. What is your first reaction? Are you sitting there thinking, wow, what a terrific negotiator I am. I could not have got a better deal. Is that what you're thinking? I don't think so. What are you thinking? Could have done better. Should have gone in lower. Now, the interesting thing about that is it has absolutely nothing to do with the price. It only has to do with the way they reacted to the proposal. What if you'd have gone in at $7,000 or $6,000 or $5,000 and they said, sure, we'll take that. Wouldn't you still think you could have done better? It has nothing to do with the price. What would your second reaction be if they jumped at a low offer on that automobile that you didn't expect them to take? Something's wrong with it, right? I need to back off and take another look at this. If they're willing to say yes to an offer that I didn't think they would, there must be something going on that I don't understand. I need to back off and take another look at this. And these same two thoughts will go through anybody's mind anytime you say okay to the first suggestion. If your son came to you and said, could I borrow the car tonight? And you said, you bet, son, take it, have a wonderful time. Wouldn't he automatically think, I could have done better, I could have got $10 for the movie out of this thing? Wouldn't he automatically think, hey, what's going on here? How come they want me out of the house? What's going on that I don't understand? What does this teach you? This teaches you that you always go through the process of negotiating. Even if the first proposal is perfectly acceptable to you, even if that's what you'll end up doing, you still go through the process of negotiating because you want the other side to feel that they won in the negotiation. Far more important that they feel that they won than that you feel that you won. In fact, I'd almost give you that as a definition of a power negotiator. Two of you may go out to negotiate something. You're in exactly the same circumstances. You both come away with exactly the same numbers. But the power negotiator comes away with the other side feeling that they won. The poor negotiator comes away with the other side feeling that they lost. It's a very simple principle to talk about. It's very easy to understand. It is very hard to do when you're in the thick of a negotiation and the proposal from the other side is better than you thought it was going to be. So you're proposing full list price on this, but you're thinking in the back of your mind, they'll never agree to that. I mean, they're going to come in at 70% of list price. If I'm lucky, we're going to have to battle this all the way up to make it work. And to your surprise, their proposal is much better than you thought it was going to be, well within your negotiating range, and you're so relieved that it wasn't worse, you make the mistake of saying yes too quickly, automatically triggering two thoughts in their mind. We could have done better, and next time we will, or if something comes up before this sale is completely finished that needs to be renegotiated, we'll be tougher negotiators next time around, and something has to be wrong here. I need to take a closer look at this. So rule number one is never jump at the first proposal. I thought that was a 100% rule until a fellow called me from Los Angeles, and he said, Roger, I was driving down Hollywood Boulevard last night listening to your cassette tapes in my car. I stopped at a gas station to use the restroom. As I came back out to my car, somebody stuck a gun in my ribs and said, "Oh, hey, buddy, give me a wallet." He said, "Well, I'd just been listening to your tapes." So I said, "Look, here's what I'm prepared to do." He said, "I'll give you the cash, but let me keep the wallet and the credit cards." Fair enough. He said, "Buddy, you didn't listen to me, did you? Give me the wallet." "Yes, sir." Sometimes you don't negotiate in this litigious age. Sometimes you don't negotiate, but it's almost a 100% rule. Don't say yes to the first proposal. Rule number 2. Ask for more than you expect to get in the negotiating process. Henry Kissinger went so far as to say that effectiveness at the bargaining table depends on your ability, now that's how well you can do it, your ability to overstate your initial demands. That's kind of interesting, isn't it? That's one of the top international negotiators of last century saying, look, I'll tell you up front, if you're going to negotiate with me, I'm going to ask for more than you will give me. But even though you know that, it's still a very good negotiating principle to follow. So I want you to give me some reasons now why it's a good idea to ask for more than you expect to get. Why should you ask for full list price even though you don't think for a moment they'll agree to that? Why should you ask for all the extras, the training, the service support, and all the rest of it, even though you don't think they'll do it? Give me some reasons for asking for more. Just raise your hand and then I'll have you call them out. Okay. So they feel that they won. Yeah, that's what Henry Kissinger is talking about. He's saying create an environment where the other side can have a win with you. If you go in with your very best offer up front, there's no way that they can negotiate with you and have a win. And inexperienced negotiators always want to do this. This is the salesperson who's saying to their sales manager, look, I'm going out on this proposal today. I know it's going to be competitive. Let me cut the price up front, otherwise we won't stand a chance of getting it. Experienced negotiators know the power of putting that full number up there. Let it sink in as the true value. If you have to make any concessions, make them very reluctantly, make the other side work for them. So that is the key issue, but there are also quite a few other issues. Give me another reason for asking for more. It raises the perceived value of your product or service. If you say to them, well, this is list price, but for you, we'll do it for this, you've immediately discounted that perceived value. Leave that full number up there, in writing if you possibly can. That's one of the 7 keys to credibility. People believe what they see in writing that they won't believe when they just hear it. If you have to make any concessions, make them very reluctantly. Give me another reason for asking for more. Yes, sometimes you get what you ask for. I mean, sometimes you just don't know how the universe is aligned on that particular day. God could be looking down at you and saying, wow, look at that salesperson from Cleveland. He's been working so hard for so long now. Let's just give him a break. Well, that could happen, and the only way you're going to find out is to ask. There's kind of a corollary to that also, and that is the less you know about the other side, the more you expand the negotiating range, the more you ask for 2 reasons. Number one, you may be misinformed if you don't know them very well. I mean, maybe you're talking about a purchasing of some real estate and you're talking about a carryback interest rate of 8%, and it sounds a little high to you, but if that person just came from Colombia where interest rates are 25% a year, it might sound very low to them, so sometimes you just don't know. And the second reason is that with a stranger, you need to build rapport quickly. Now, being able to make concessions to the other side is the fastest way to build rapport with a stranger. Not the best way, but the fastest way. So, good. You might just get it. Give me another reason of asking for more. Yes, believing in the product, believing that your product and service is worth more. It raises the perceived value of your product or service. So there are quite a few reasons for doing this, isn't it? A very simple principle, a lot of reasons behind doing this. Let's just recap them now. It gives you some room to negotiate. Now, we didn't cover that one, but it just makes it easier to get what you really want if you've got some room to negotiate. A while back, my oldest son, Dwight, came to me and he said, Dad, could I borrow your Corvette tonight? I said, well, Dwight, wait a minute. That's a pretty fast car. I don't think I'd feel comfortable with you driving around all night in the Corvette. And he looked really disappointed and he said, well, could I borrow the minivan then? I said, well, all right, I guess I don't have a problem with you borrowing the minivan. And I didn't think anything of it until half an hour later I looked out into the driveway. Dwight plays bass guitar with this group. He's loading these huge loudspeakers into the back of the minivan. So wait a minute, he had absolutely no intention of borrowing the Corvette. He just knew ask for more than you expect to get makes it easier to get what you really want. You might just get it, you said? It raises the perceived value of product of your service or product, you said. It creates a climate where the other side can win, you said. And here's another one. It prevents deadlocks when dealing with an egotistical person. Now, all that I really mean by egotistical person is someone who is proud of their ability to negotiate. You've all met these buyers, right? They've been studying negotiating, they feel they're good negotiators. They're going to negotiate with you, and they're going to have a win. And if you don't give them room to have a win, the negotiations will deadlock on you. Take a look at the first Persian Gulf War. Back in 1991, what were we asking Saddam Hussein to do? You remember the Persian Gulf War? It was on CNN. Get out of Kuwait, right? Actually, there were three things that George Bush, the father, said with a beautiful piece of alliteration, probably written by Peggy Noonan. I'm not bragging, I'm not bluffing, and I'm not bullying. But there's three things this man's got to do. He's got to get out of Kuwait. He's got to restore the legitimate government of Kuwait. Don't do what the Soviets did in Afghanistan and put a puppet government in. And he's got to make reparations for the damages that he did. So those were the three things he was saying he had to do. What's the problem with that? The problem with that is it was also our bottom line. It was the least we were prepared to settle for. No wonder at deadlock we didn't give this egotistical man room to have a win in the negotiations. If we'd have said to him basically what we said this second time around, we want you and all your cronies exiled, we want a neutral government installed in Baghdad, complete removal of all military capability, plus those three things, then we could have given him a win and still got what we wanted. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, wait a minute, Roger. Saddam Hussein was not on my Christmas card list last year. This is not the kind of person I want to give a win to. Well, I agree with you on that. But if you're dealing with an egotistical person, you don't give them room to have a win, the negotiations will deadlock. Now, from that scenario in the First Persian Gulf War, you could draw one or two conclusions. Here's possibility number one. Our State Department negotiators are complete blithering idiots, right? This is possibility number one. What's possibility number two? I don't think we had any intention of settling for those three things. We couldn't. General Schwarzkopf, in his book, It Doesn't Take a Hero, said, the minute we got down there, we understood that anything less than a military victory was a defeat for the United States. We couldn't let this man pull 600,000 troops back across the border, have him sitting there wondering when he might choose to invade Saudi Arabia. We had to have a reason to go in and militarily defeat him. So there's an example of a negotiation where we wanted to create a deadlock because it served our purpose. What I'm concerned about is in your day-to-day negotiations, you're inadvertently creating deadlocks because you don't feel comfortable with the concept of asking for more than you expect to get, reluctantly backing off of that position. So if we're going to ask for more than we expect to get, the next question should be is, how much more than we expect to get should we ask for? This is called bracketing. Bracketing says that your opening position should be an equal distance from your objective as their opening negotiating position. Or in simple language, assume that you will end up in the middle of the negotiating range. Well, of course, it's not always true that you'll end up at the midpoint. But wow, is that a good assumption to make? If you don't have anything else to go on, assume that you will end up midway between the two opening negotiating positions. And I think if you'll track that, you'll be astounded at how often that happens in little things and in big things too. In little things, your children come to you and they want $20 for some project they're working on. You say, no, I'm going to give you $20. Look, do you realize when I was your age, walking barefoot through the snow uphill both ways and all that? Look, I'll give you $10, but no more. So now we've established a negotiating range. They're asking for 20, we're offering 10. See how often you end up giving them 15. In big things, in 1982, we were negotiating the paydown of a loan with the government of Mexico. They were about to default on an $82 billion loan. We resolved most of the unpaid interest by having them contribute their government-owned petroleum to our strategic petroleum reserves. But there was still some left over, so we proposed to them that they pay us a $100 million negotiating fee in order to resolve this. Well, when President Portillo heard about this, he went absolutely ballistic. He said, you're asking us to pay you a $100 million negotiating fee? No way. I'm not going to pay you $100 million. In fact, we're not going to pay you anything, nothing, nada. So now we've established the negotiating range. We're asking for $100 million. They're saying nothing. Guess what they ended up paying us? $50 million. What do you think they might have ended up paying us if we'd have asked for $50 million? Probably $25 million, right? So often you end up in the middle. So power negotiators just assume that that is going to happen. Every negotiator in the country knew that Paula Jones was going to get $850,000 from Bill Clinton. You remember the numbers? Her attorney said, look, you want this all to go away, it's going to cost you $1 million. His attorney said, that's ridiculous. We're not going to pay that. We're willing to pay something just to get rid of the whole mess, but not a penny more than $700,000. Took a few weeks for it all to shake out, but eventually there they are, writing the check, right in the middle at $850,000. So assume that's going to happen. Now, this brings us to another very important negotiating point. I think this is the second most important thing to learn about negotiating. You remember the first thing was the perception of options gives you power in the negotiation. That's number one. This is number two. In order to bracket, you've got to get the other person to commit to a position first. If you can get them to commit to a position, then all you have to do is bracket that proposal so that if you end up in the middle, you get what you want. If they can get you to commit to your very best price first, all they have to do is bracket that so that if you end up in the middle, they get what they want. The very worst negotiating position for a salesperson to be in is RFPs, requests for proposals or requests for quotations. You all know what I'm talking about on that? Okay, it's a terrible negotiating position for the supplier to be in because that's the buyer saying, you make a commitment to us, but we're not going to make any kind of commitment to you at all. It's a terrible negotiating position for you to be in. Now, it's a great position for the buyers to be in. When I train the buyers, that's exactly what I teach them to do, is send RFPs out to everybody. Because when a supplier gets an RFP, two thoughts go through their mind. Thought number one, this is going to be competitive. If they've gone to the trouble to send out an RFP, they must have sent it to a lot of people. Therefore, I've got a lot of competitors. Therefore, they have a lot of power because they have the options. That may not be true at all. You may be the only company that got that RFP. But it's not the perception you get, is it? The perception is that it went to a lot of people. The second thought that goes through your mind is, this is going to be very price conscious. Anybody who can meet the standards of the RFP, the requirements of it, they're going to go with the lowest price, which of course is absolute nonsense. Nobody would ever buy anything just based on price. Nobody. Would you go down to the hardware store and buy a nail if the only thing you knew about that nail was it was the cheapest nail on the planet? Of course you wouldn't. Nobody would ever buy anything just based on price, but it's a very, very good impression to put into the buyer's mind, isn't it, that this is going to be very price conscious. When buyers get together, you know, they go to seminars too. They talk about how to deal with salespeople. And the first thing they say is, I want that salesperson thinking that they're selling a commodity. And I can do it to any salesperson, they brag. I can convince that salesperson that what they're selling is just a commodity to me. I don't care about everything else. All I care about is the price. So that's what they talk about. They talk about making you think that it's very price conscious and thinking you think that you've got comparable competition. That may not be true. It probably isn't true. But it's a very good thing for the buyer to implant in the salesperson's mind. So anytime now if you're selling something, I don't have a problem with you going first in the sense of this is our list price, this is what you pay for it. You got to go first in that sense. But any other concessions that they ask you for, you want the proposal to come from them, not from you. You never want to be in a position of throwing numbers at a buyer, hoping that that buyer will say yes to one of your numbers. Our objective in the negotiation is to get them to propose the number that we want them to propose. We will reluctantly agree to that suggestion, service in the perception in their mind that they won in the negotiation. All right, now let's talk about let me give you a little technique for when buyers say to you, no, that's not good enough. You'll have to make me a better offer than that. You say, well, as far as I know, this number that you've shown them in writing is the best we can do. But I tell you what, if you'll make a proposal to us, I'd be happy to take it to my people. I'll teach you later how you should always have a vague higher authority behind you that you have to check with. Never give yourself the authority to make a decision in the negotiation. I'll take it to my people, and I'll see what I can do for you with them. That's good guy, bad guy. I'll teach you that as an ending negotiating gambit. Yes, we have a question in the middle. And what type of business are you in? With what? Okay, physicians and healthcare. Yeah. Physicians are terrible negotiators, aren't they? They just... I teach a lot of physician groups. They think hidden agendas are immoral. That if somebody says to you, what's your best price, you're obligated to tell them what your best price is. But I try and tell them we don't operate like that in business. It's a different game over there. So a good suggestion. Appreciate you bringing that up. Now let's talk about the number one mistake that I see beginning negotiators make. They don't flinch at the other side's proposal. Let's say you are down at the waterfront here, and here's one of these charcoal sketch artists doing the sketch, doesn't have the price posted. And you say, how much is the sketch? He says, $15. If that doesn't appear to shock you, his next words will be, and $5 extra for color. If you still don't appear to be shocked, he'll say, when we have these shipping cartons here, you'll need one of these too. As opposed to with the flinch, how much is the sketch? $15. $15, that's a lot of money. And he says, well, I'll tell you what I'll do. I normally charge $5 extra for the color. For you, I'll throw it in at no extra charge. That's still a lot of money, he's saying. He says, well, come here. I have never, ever done this before. But you're such a nice person, I'll not only throw in the color, I'll give you one of these shipping cartons too. See the difference? Now, any of you know somebody who would never do anything like that because it's just too theatrical for them? It's the kind of person who would walk into a store and say, how much is the coat in the window? $2,000. That's not bad, they say. You should be having a heart attack in the background. Now, I know it sounds dumb, and I know it sounds ridiculous, and I know you're thinking, come on, Roger, I'm not going to make a fool of myself doing dumb stuff like that. But see, very often in a negotiation, the other side will throw something out on a negotiating table, and they really don't expect you to do it. They're just throwing it out to see what your reaction will be. And when they say to you, no, you'll have to match a competitor's price in order to get this, or you'll have to include the freight or give us extended terms, they may not think for a moment you're going to do that. They just threw it out to see what your reaction would be. And if you don't flinch, all of a sudden they start thinking, well, maybe I will get them to do that. I didn't think they would, but they don't tend to be too shocked. Let's hang in. Let's be tough negotiators. It's very interesting to watch a negotiation when you know what both sides are thinking. When I do the all-day and the two-day seminars, we actually break up into groups and we do some negotiating together. So we have buyers, sellers, and referees. Now, the referees are in a very interesting position because they have been in on the planning sessions of both the buyers and the sellers. They know what each side's negotiating range is. They know what these buyers are going to start at. They know what they're prepared to go to. So they might see the buyers make a proposal to the sellers that they know these buyers think this is an outrageously low proposal. They barely have the nerve to suggest it. They think they're going to get laughed out of the room the minute they do. But to their surprise, they make the proposal, and the sellers don't appear to be that shocked. They thought the sellers were going to say, wait a minute, you want us to do what? No, you got to be out of your mind. We're not going to do that. Instead, the seller's response was much more measured, and the sellers were saying, well, no, I don't think we're prepared to go that low. And in an instant, the negotiation changes. You can see the change in the buyer's face. What a moment ago was an outrageously low proposal to them now becomes doable. Now they're thinking, well, maybe we're not as far apart as we thought we were. Let's hang in. Let's be tough negotiators. So what we need you to do before you go into a negotiation is get you in front of the mirror, practicing your flinches, because people are watching for your reaction. Now, the people who study this kind of thing, the body language experts, will tell you that a huge amount of what you're communicating to people when you're negotiating with them is not what you're saying. Now, a lot of it has to do with the way that you're saying it, the emphasis you're putting on the words. The expression that linguists like to play with is, I didn't say that he stole my car. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means a whole bunch of different things depending on where you put the emphasis on the words. I didn't say that he stole my car. My attorney said it. I didn't say that he stole my car. I put it in a letter to the plain dealer. I didn't say that he stole my car. I said he stole my wife's car. I didn't say that he stole my car. I said he stole my pickup truck. So it depends a lot of different things depending on where you put the emphasis on the words. But half of it has nothing to do with what you're saying or the way you're saying it. It's what they're looking at. The visual overrides the auditory in most people. Now, I'm sure you've all had a little neurolinguistic training, right? Yes? I would think so, depending on how well you know the person and what the situation is. Yes. You certainly want to use humor if they flinch on you. You want to say, wow, that was a great flinch. My goodness, where'd you learn to do that? Neurolinguistic training, I'm sure you know that people are either visual, more inclined to believe what they see, or they're auditory, more inclined to believe what they hear, or they're kinesthetic, more inclined to believe what they feel. There's a few gustatory and olfactory people out there, taste and smell, but they're chefs and perfume testers. You don't run into them very much. Basically, we're talking about these three. If you'd like to know which you are, I can teach you in 10 seconds. Close your eyes. Now, wait a minute. I notice some of you are reluctant to close your eyes there. Is this because you've had a problem with an Englishman in the past? That's why they say the sun never sets on the British Empire, that even God wouldn't trust an Englishman in the dark. Close your eyes. I want you to think of the house in which you lived when you were 10 years old. Okay, go ahead and open your eyes. Some of you, when you thought about the house, you just saw the house in your mind. You just got a visual picture of it. Raise your hand if you're a visual. Okay, look at the high percentage of hands going up. Some of you didn't so much see, but you got an auditory cue. You heard trains going by, or parents yelling at you, or children playing, or something auditory. Just a handful of auditories. That's typically the lowest percentage, but auditories tend to be very auditory. I have a friend in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Neil is a psychotherapist. He's very auditory. He can remember every conversation he's ever had with a patient. If he meets them in the supermarket, he doesn't recognize them. Now, the minute they say, "Good morning, doctor," he thinks, "Oh, yes, that's the bipolar personality with antisocial tendencies." He triggers in on what he hears, not what he sees. Some of you didn't so much see or hear, you just got a feeling for what it was like when you were 10 years old. These would be the kinesthetic people. Okay, a little higher percentage of kinesthetics, but wait a minute, we didn't get everybody. There must be another group in the room. Here's the other group. How many of you, when asked a question by a speaker, never ever raise your hands? May I see your hands, please? That's a high percentage of visuals. But we have become a very visual society, haven't we? We got to see it to believe it these days. Can you imagine if we had never seen a picture of what happened on 9/11, how much trouble we would have in believing that? We've become a very visual society. So assume that people are visual unless you have something else to go on. And that's the importance of the flinch, that visual reaction to the proposal that they have made, the concession they've asked you for. Avoid confrontational negotiation. Arguing always intensifies people's desire to prove themselves right. That's the problem I have with the way that some attorneys negotiate. They're very confrontational negotiators, aren't they? You get that envelope with the raised black letter in the top left-hand corner, you think, "Oh, no, not again. What is it this time?" And you open it up, and what's the first communication you have from the other side? It's a threat, what they're going to do to you if you don't do what they want you to do. So it's a confrontational style of negotiating. Did you hear about the personal injury attorneys who showed up at the gates of heaven, and St. Peter met them, and he thought, "We've never had personal injury attorneys up here before. I don't know what to do. I better go ask God." And he runs back to God, and he says, "Out of the pearly gates, we've got this bunch of personal injury attorneys. What am I supposed to do?" God says, "Well, I don't know. We've never had any up here before." He said, "Well, I guess let them in." So St. Peter runs back to the pearly gates. He looks around. He runs back to God, and he says, "They're gone. They're gone." And God says, "The attorneys left?" He said, "No, the pearly gates, they're gone. They're gone." I say don't argue with people up front. Arguing always intensifies people's desire to prove themselves right. When they say to you, "Wait a minute, your prices are way higher than everybody else," and when you say, "No, they're not, we check this out all the time, we're right in line with legitimate competition," that's saying, "Hey, I'm right, you're wrong." You're simply going to force them into defending the position they've taken. I think you're better off to agree and then turn it around using the old feel, felt, found formula. Well, I understand exactly how you feel about that, because many other people, when they first hear about our program, have felt the same way as you do right now. Now you're not arguing with them, you're agreeing with them based on the amount of information they have up to this point. But you know what we have always found when we really sit down and talk about what's best for you too? Everybody always agrees we have the best value in the marketplace. So don't argue with people, agree and then turn it around. Reluctant buyer. You would think it fairly obvious that if you approached a seller with this kind of enthusiasm, you wouldn't get a very good buy. But it's amazing how often I see that rule being broken, particularly on car lots. I'll see somebody go into a car lot and get so excited and enthusiastic about a particular make and model of car. They'll pick out the colors, the upholstery, the options. They might even say to the salesperson, "My car broke down today, I need something to get to work in tomorrow," and then they expect to negotiate a good price. It simply doesn't work like that. You always play the reluctant buyer role. So let's say you're buying new computer equipment for your company. You let the vendor salesperson come in, you let them set up their demonstration, you let them take all the time that they want. You ask all the questions you can think of. Finally, when you cannot think of another thing to say, you say, wow, I really appreciate all the time you've taken on this, but unfortunately this is just not the way we want to go. You say the look of expectation, go from here down to here. They start to package their stuff up. They start to leave. At the very last minute, you come back with this magic expression. There's some magic expressions in negotiating. If you'll use them at exactly the right moment, it's amazing how predictable the response of the other side is. The very last minute, you say, wait a minute, I do want to be fair to you because you've taken so much time on this. Just to be fair to you, what is the very best price you could give us? It's remarkably effective for squeezing the negotiating range. Now, this is not the end of the negotiations. It's not even the beginning of the negotiations. We're just squeezing their expectations right up front. Now, in a situation like that, the negotiating range is the wish price, what they're wishing you'd be willing to pay, to the walkaway price, the price at which they will not or cannot do business. Now, when you play a reluctant buyer, they're not going to come all the way down from the wish price to the walkaway price. But here's what will typically happen. They will give away half their negotiating range just because you did that. It gives you a pretty good feel for how far you may be able to get them to go if you keep on negotiating. Now, why am I talking about a buyer like that when I know most of you are on the selling side? I want to get across to you that the buyers are playing the negotiating game with you. Those of you who have been around for a while, would you agree with me that the buyers are better negotiators than they used to be in the early days? And these companies that you're selling to have just figured out that the fastest way to improve their bottom line is to take it right off the bottom line of their suppliers. So they've upgraded that position. In the past, you may have been talking to a buyer who just started in the warehouse and worked their way up, and now they're a buyer for the company. Nowadays, you could be talking to somebody with an MBA degree. They've just come back from a week-long negotiating course at Harvard University, because that's the fastest way for your buyers to put profit onto their bottom line, is to do a better job negotiating with their suppliers. So realize they're playing the negotiating game with you. When they say to you, you'll have to match a competitor's price, that doesn't mean you have to match a competitor's price. What it means is that's the negotiating game they've put into play at that point in time. And the minute you think like that, it's just a negotiating tactic. I understand what they're doing to me. I know how to respond to it. You become a much more powerful negotiator. Reluctant seller. Look out for this one when you're trying to buy something. Donald Trump sold the San Moritz Hotel in New York to Alan Bond, the Australian billionaire, when he was doing well. This was 1991, and Donald Trump was in serious financial trouble. He was very highly leveraged in New York real estate. He knew the market was overbuilt. He knew it was about to come down, and he needed to raise cash quickly to survive the crunch. And the best shot he had was to sell the San Moritz Hotel. He'd bought it from the Hemsleys 3 years before this for $79 million. He turned around and sold it to Bond for $160 million. It gave him the cash he needed to survive. But as desperately as he needed to sell that hotel, he was still playing reluctant seller with Bond. He was saying, oh, Alan, not the San Moritz, that's my favorite property. I'm never going to sell that. I'm going to put that in trust for my grandchildren. Look, anything else I have is for sale. Make me an offer, but not the San Moritz. But look, I do appreciate you coming all this way, so just to be fair to you, what is the very best price you would give me? Unless you realize what they're doing to you, you'll go from the low point of your negotiating range to the midpoint, maybe even the high point, before the negotiations even start. One of the things we teach you in the home study course that makes you a better negotiator is the understanding that there is always pressure on the other side, just as much as there is on you. But it never appears to be that way. You always think you've got the weaker hand because you know all about the pressure that's on you. You don't know about the pressure that's on the other side. But it's there. Something brought them to the negotiating table. If they can get a better deal from somebody else, why haven't they done that already? They have pressure on them just as much as you have pressure on you. Here's another little magic expression. You'll be amazed at what this will do for you, the vice gambit. Very simple little expression. We're going to get them to make the proposal to us if we possibly can. We're going to consider it very seriously. If it's in writing, we'll read it all the way through. And then we'll turn it back around and we'll slide it back across the desk and say, I'm sorry, you'll have to do better than this. Now, a power negotiator will automatically respond with the counter gamut, which is, well, exactly how much better than this do I have to do? Trying to pin you down to a specific. But you'll be amazed how often inexperienced negotiators will concede a big chunk of their negotiating range just because you said that. I'm sorry, you'll have to do better than this. What would you do next, right after you said those words? You're doing it, but you're not telling me. Be quiet, right? Shut up. The next person to talk loses. The next person to open their mouth in a negotiation will make a concession in the negotiation. Old-time salespeople call this the silent close. I once watched two salespeople do the silent close on each other, if you can imagine this. Three of us seated at this small conference table, and this salesperson makes a proposal to this salesperson and shuts up. This salesperson thinks, son of a gun, I can't believe this. He's going to try the silent close on moi. Well, I'll teach him a thing or two. I won't talk either. So now we've got these two strong-willed people sitting there staring at each other, daring each other to be the next one to talk. I didn't know how this was ever going to get resolved. It seemed like half an hour went by. It was probably more like 5 minutes, because in our culture, silence seems like a long time. Now, be aware of that when you're dealing with people from other cultures. They know that Americans can't stand silence. In the middle of a negotiation, they'll all of a sudden shut up on you, knowing that it puts pressure on us. So it seemed like ages went by. Finally, the impasse was broken when this salesperson wrote the word decision, question mark, on a pad of paper, turned around and slid it across to the table to the other one. But he was creative enough to deliberately misspell decision. He put a Z instead of an S. The other salesperson looked at it, and without thinking, he said, you misspelled decision. And once he started talking, he couldn't stop. Any of you know a salesperson like that? Once they start talking, they can't stop. He went on to say, look, if you're not prepared to do what I suggested, I might be prepared to do this. He renegotiated his own proposal before he found out whether the other person would accept it or not. Simply, I'm sorry, you'll have to do better than this, and be quiet. And I've forgotten what to do next. Oh, there we go. One of my clients is a company down in Jacksonville, Florida, called Florida Rock. They sound like a musical group, but they're a huge company that owns most of the rock quarries in the southeast part of the country. And they called me up after a seminar that I did, and they said, Roger, we thought you might like to know, we just made $14,000 using one of the gambits you taught us. I said, we were having equipment put into our Miami office. We got 3 qualified vendors to bid. I was about to okay the lowest bid and mail it back to them when I remember what you told us about the vice technique. So I thought, well, what have I got to lose? So I scrawled across it, you'll have to do better than this. Their counter proposal came back $14,000 less than the proposal that I was prepared to accept. Now, you may be thinking, well, Roger, wait a minute. You didn't tell us whether that was a $50,000 proposal, in which case $14,000 would be a huge concession, or a multi-million-dollar proposal, in which case $14,000 wouldn't be that big a deal. Don't fall into the trap of negotiating percentages when you should be negotiating dollars. It really doesn't make any sense for a salesperson to come back to their sales manager and say, well, I had to make a $2,000 concession here, but it's a $100,000 order. See, that's thinking percentages. What they should have been thinking was, there was $2,000 sitting in the middle of the negotiating table. How long should I be willing to spend to negotiate this? You've got to have a feel for what your time's worth. Don't spend half an hour negotiating a $10 item. Even if you won, you don't even be making money at the rate of $20 an hour, and you have to do better than that. To put this in perspective for you, $50,000 a year is about $25 an hour. $100,000 a year is about $50 an hour. $200,000 a year is about $100 an hour. So if that's your yardstick, you might be thinking to yourself, is what I'm doing right now generating more than $100 an hour? If it is, it's part of the solution. If it's not, it's part of the problem. Now, I'm going to suggest to you that when you have a proposal in front of you that you could live with, but you're thinking, I wonder if I could hang in and do a little bit better, you're not making $100 an hour. You're making $100 a minute, maybe $100 a second in some of these bigger deals. You'll never make money faster than you will when you're negotiating. I don't care if you do brain surgery in your spare time, you will never make money faster than you will when you're negotiating. Now, for those of you who own your own companies, that's just the beginning, because if you own your own company, that negotiated dollar is a bottom line profit dollar. All of your expenses are going to stay the same whether you negotiate this or whether you don't. It goes into your pocket. It's a bottom line profit dollar. You'll never make money faster than you will when you're negotiating. So these are the beginning negotiating gambits, the things we do in the early stages of the negotiation to be sure you're setting it up for a successful conclusion. So those are the beginning negotiating gambits. We'll come back and we'll do the middle and the ending gambits later. Let's talk now about one of the things that always affects the outcome of the negotiations, and that's personal power. How intimidated are you by the other side? I've listed the 8 things that people can do to you when you're negotiating with them to cause you to blink first at the negotiating table. And after we've gone through this, you'll see The next time you're in a situation where you're thinking, I think I'm going to have to make a concession in order to put this together, you'll be able to run down this list in your mind and see what it is that's getting to you. Identifying it will help you handle it. Legitimate power is basically the power of the title. We respect titles and professional designations in this country. We have a tougher time negotiating with the president or the vice president of a corporation than we do the buyer at the corporation. So we're influenced by titles. So if you have a title, use it. If you don't have a title, see if you can't get one. But don't be intimidated because the other person has a fancy title. Yes, ma'am. Yes, we're going to talk about higher authority later on. You should never be making concessions to someone who doesn't have the power in a negotiation to agree to the proposal. You never want to find out that there's another level of higher authority there. We'll talk about that when we get to middle negotiating gambits and specifically how to handle that problem. You can talk to somebody who doesn't have the authority to say yes to you, but you don't make concessions to that person or improve your position for them at all until you found out that they could make a decision. So the power of the title. Don't be intimidated because the other person has a fancy title, because some of these titles don't mean a thing. My daughter graduated from USC, the University of Spoiled Children. She hates it when I say that. University of Southern California with a business finance degree. And she went to work for Dean Witter, the huge New York stockbroker. She went through all the training classes in Wall Street, and then she was assigned as a financial advisor in their Beverly Hills office, a huge office. She hadn't been there very long before she was talking about becoming a vice president of Dean Witter. And I said, Julia, wait a minute, you've got to set realistic goals in life. That's a huge corporation. It may take you years and years to become a vice president. She said, oh, no, I think I'll be a vice president by the end of the year. I said, well, wait a minute, how many vice presidents does Dean Witter have? She said, I don't know, it must be thousands. We've got 35 in this one office. Simply because they understand titles influence people. Don't be intimidated. Reward power. If you think that they are rewarding you by giving you the order, you have given them the power to intimidate you. You've just said, here I am, have your way with me, if you feel like that. This is very much a subjective thing. You remember Robin Givens? She was Mike Tyson's wife for a short period of time. Weren't they a charming couple? Weren't you just proud to be on the same planet as those two floating around space? When she, after 8 months of marriage, was heading out to Los Angeles to get a divorce attorney, I'm sure she wasn't thinking that she would be rewarding Marvin Mitchelson by giving him the case. No, she was thinking, wow, if I can get Marvin Mitchelson to represent me, that would be really something because he's the best in the business. You can't do any better than that. You're the best in the business. They can't do any better than you. If you're willing to do business with them and you're willing to put all of your expertise on the line to solve their problems and all the backing of your company to solve their problems, you are rewarding them, they're not rewarding you. Now, obviously, you can't push that too far. It'll quickly become arrogance, but don't roll over and think that it's all one-sided. Coercive power, the opposite side of that, is the power to punish. You know how awful you feel when the state trooper pulls you over to the side of the road and is standing there and can write you or not write you a ticket. The penalty may not be very great, but the level of intimidation is very great indeed, isn't it? These are the two that get to salespeople when they first start out. They're out there prospecting for new business, and they perceive everybody they meet can reward them by giving them an order, or punish them by turning them down, or worse yet, ridiculing them for what they have proposed. Once they've been at it long enough to realize that selling is a numbers game. If you're out there prospecting as hard as you should be for new business, there always will be a high percentage of people who will turn you down. There's no reason to take that as personal rejection. This next element is the number one influencing factor you can have in dealing with people, and most people haven't heard of it. Reverent power. Reverent power goes to anybody who can project that they have a consistent set of values. An obvious example of that would be a religious leader, but it's interesting to look at political figures and see how they've benefited or suffered from the ability to project a consistent set of values. John F. Kennedy did it well, and John F. Kennedy talked about the new frontier, the mantle of power passing to a new generation born in this century. He did it well. His brother Robert did it brilliantly. You remember Robert's slogan, some men look at things the way they are and say, why? I dream of things that never were and say, why not? That's good stuff. That's high-powered stuff. I believe in something. I stand for something. Teddy Kennedy never figured it out. Don't know where he was. My goodness. He just never figured it out that if you act consistently, people want to follow you. Jimmy Carter did not do it well. Now, I thought Jimmy Carter was one of the nicest presidents we've ever had, one of the hardest working, and certainly one of the most intelligent. He majored in nuclear physics. This is a brilliant person who lost his ability to influence people, which is what selling is all about. It's what marketing is all about. It's what management is all about. He lost his ability to influence people because he appeared to vacillate on different issues. He never quite knew if he felt strongly enough about something to hang in if the going got tough. With Ronald Reagan, you never had a question in your mind where he stood on a particular issue. You could agree with him or disagree with him, but you have to admit that you never had a question in your mind where he stood on a particular issue because he had mastered the power of a consistent set of values. When you master it, you'll be amazed at how much influence this gives you over people. When you can sit down with a customer and say, Mr. Customer, I work very hard to build my reputation in this business. And one of the things I built it on is I will not do anything that is not in my customer's best interest. Regardless of the gain to me, I simply won't do it. Now, if you really think you need to cut corners like that, and frankly, I think you're making a huge mistake, but if you really want to cut corners like that, perhaps you're better off to do business with somebody else because we just won't do that. You would think that would run them off, wouldn't you? But it doesn't. They love it. People want to follow. They want to be led by people that they see as having a consistent set of values. Think about this for a minute. Let's say you had the misfortune to have a heart attack. You wake up, you're in a hospital bed. Heart surgeon's looking down at you and saying, wow, I got bad news for you. You need a triple bypass operation. You look up and you say, oh, I think I can get by with a double bypass. If that surgeon said to you, well, let's try a double bypass and see how it works, would you let that person near you with a knife? I don't think so. We want to follow, we want to be led by someone that we see as having a consistent set of values. So it's very powerful, but also realize it can be very intimidating. When that buyer says to you, but no, this is the way we've always done it, all of our suppliers, this is our standard contract, we've never been an exception to that rule. It's very hard to argue against that because we admire people who do things consistently. So if you run into that, either you can establish there have been exceptions to the rule. If you can't do that, you've got to convince them it's time to change the rule. Don't ask people to break their rules, ask them to change the rules. That may have been a very good position to take in the past, but these days you've got to be more flexible than that. Charismatic power, the power of the personality. Sure, they're more likely to do business with you if they like you than if they don't like you, but it's a long way from control of the negotiations. Don't fall into the Willy Loman trap. When Arthur Miller wrote Death of a Salesman and had Willy Loman saying the most important thing is to be liked, he was making fun of him for doing that. In fact, I think salespeople today have done too much relationship selling. They've made friends with the buyers that they're selling to the point where if they don't make all of the concessions that their company will allow them to make to their friend the buyer, they let their friend the buyer down. I really think they've moved over to that other position. Our objective in a negotiation is to have them like us so much that they're making concession to us because of that, but we don't get to liking them so much that we're making concessions to them just because of that. Far more important is expertise power. If you can convince them that you have an expertise that they do not have, you develop an enormous ability to influence people. Doctors and attorneys really play this one up, don't they? Not a reason in the world why doctors couldn't write prescriptions in English, but if they did, it would take away a little bit of that expertise, a little bit of that mystique. Attorneys develop a whole new language that you can't understand in order to project expertise to you. Hear about the attorney who died and went to heaven? That's not the punchline. St. Peter said, wow, we're thrilled to have you up here. We've never had a 125-year-old attorney up here before. He says, I'm not 125, I'm 39. St. Peter said, well, there must be some confusion. According to the hours that you've billed. Expertise power is so important these days. You remember when you used to be proud that you knew how to program your microwave oven? You didn't think anything could get much more complicated than that? My goodness, look at what we have to do these days. Expertise power is so important to you now. You've got to be on a constant path of learning and training because what you know now will not be good enough a year from now. 5 years from now, if that's all you know, you'll be obsolete. The world is changing so fast. You just don't know if even your industry will exist 5 years from now. I didn't say your company, I said your industry. And you said, well, Roger, wait a minute. I work for a bank. We'll still have banks 5 years from now, won't we? I'm not so sure. I don't even know if we'll have money 5 years from now. We may abolish money completely, do everything on credit slips, and of course when we do that, there won't be any more crime because the money will be so traceable. You say, well, look, I work for a company that makes parts for automobiles. We'll still be making automobiles 5 years from now, won't we? Well, yes, probably so, but they'll probably be made in Indonesia or just north of Hong Kong in China, where you can get motivated, educated, skilled help for $50 a month. The world is changing so fast now. You've got to say to yourself, I got to stay on top of this thing. I got to be constantly learning and improving my skills in every area. Because I'm preaching to the choir. That's why you're here tonight, right? You understand how important that is. Take a look at these three together. These three together are very, very critical. Do you know somebody who has an enormous ability to influence people? It's the sales manager who can just walk into a potential customer, start to talk about the program. They don't appear to be selling. They certainly don't appear to be closing hard. But after 20 or 30 minutes, the buyer is saying, well, how are we going to put this thing together? How's it going to work? And you're saying, wow, they're not having half the trouble that I'm having selling the program. What's the difference? Here's the difference. They've done a good job with these three. Reverent power, I will not do anything that is not in your best interest, regardless of the gain to me. That builds trust. Charismatic power, they're a likable personality, and expertise power. They project it to the other person. They have an expertise that they do not have. Situation power. This is the person down at the post office, normally very powerless in any other area of their life. In this particular situation, they have power over you because they can accept or reject your package. And don't they love to use it? Very prevalent in government agencies and huge corporations where they don't have a lot of latitude in what they're allowed to do. When they get a little latitude on you, they love to use it. The people I think about these days, when I think about situation power, the security screeners at the airports, these kids that can decide whether you get on the plane or don't get on the plane. I did a program in Lansing, Michigan, and I needed to fly the 25 minutes down to Detroit, catch my plane back to Los Angeles. I go through the archway in the Lansing, Michigan airport. The thing goes off. I said, Mr. Dawson, go over there, take your shoes off, open up your bag, go through a complete search. Everything's fine. I go back up to the gate, and I get pulled out of line again. Go over there, take your shoes off, open up your bag, complete search. I get on the plane, 25 minutes, I'm down to Detroit, walk over to my new gate, and I get pulled out of line again. I said, look, I am not doing this. This is ridiculous. This will be the third time in an hour that you've gone through this. You know who I am. You can look at your computer. I've flown 800,000 miles with you. And I almost said, and I haven't hijacked a plane yet. In a rare moment of restraint, I thought, maybe I better not say that. And this kid said to me, well, Mr. Dawson, fine, that's not a problem at all. It's just I'm not going to let you on the plane. I said, you know, you explained that extremely well. I think I'll go over there and take my bag, open up my bag and take my shoes off. I mean, sometimes you're in a negotiation and you're going to lose that one, however good a negotiator you are. And you might as well lose it quickly, lose it gracefully. Don't get all upset about having to make a concession to where you lose the goodwill of the customer and still have to make a concession. That doesn't make any sense at all. But how many times have we been to a store to get a refund on something? Or asked a hotel for a late checkout, and finally they're saying to us, well, all right, we'll do it this one time, but it's not our normal policy. What sense does that make? If you're going to make the concession anyway, make it quickly, make it gracefully. Maintain the goodwill of the other person. Information power. Sharing information like this forms a bond between us. Withholding information intimidates. The human race has a tremendous desire to know what's going on. We can't stand a mystery. You can put a cow in a field, it'll stay in that field all its life and never wonder what's on the other side of that hill. We're going to spend billions of dollars to fly to Mars because we've just got to know if there's microscopic life on Mars or not. We just can't stand not knowing. When you understand how strong that need to know is in human nature, you can understand why this is intimidating. You made a presentation to a committee of buyers, and they say, we need to talk about this for just a minute. Would you mind waiting outside in the lobby? We'll call you when you're ready. We're ready for you. You feel so intimidated sitting outside there, and the reason you feel intimidated is that you don't like information being withheld. Once you understand that they're in there talking about last night's game for all you know, knowing that when you walk back into the negotiations, your level of self-confidence will have gone down, their level of self-confidence has gone up, then that can no longer intimidate you. It's the same with all of these. The next time you feel intimidated by somebody, run down this list in your mind, see what it is that's getting to you. The minute you identify what it is, it loses its power to influence you. So these are the 8 things that people can do to you to cause you to blink first. They're also the 8 things that give you power over people. This is where your ability comes from to walk in with a proposal and walk out with exactly what you want. It's a combination of 8 of these. Now, 4 of them are very, very critical. If you like to check these 4 off at the side: legitimate power, reward power, reverent power, and charismatic power. If you can be a 10 in each of these 4 areas, you really can have anything you want in dealing with people. Now, it has nothing to do with right or wrong. It has nothing to do with good or evil. On the evil side of the coin, it's Adolf Hitler getting control of Germany in the 1930s. He kept stressing the power of the title, Führer, Führer. Kept stressing the reward power. Kept saying to the German people, if we do this, if we invade Czechoslovakia, Poland, this is what we'll get. Reverent power, the dictatorial, consistent set of values. And charismatic power, the hypnotic ability to stand up in front of tens and thousands of people and hold them mesmerized with his oratory. On the good side of the coin is when you go to John F. Kennedy. Every president has the power of the title. Every president can reward. Not every president can project a consistent set of values. This is Jimmy Carter's undoing. He appeared to vacillate on different issues. And Bill Clinton was just all over the board on this one. Initially very, very weak. I think he was the first president in the history of the nation who didn't threaten to veto a bill in the first 2 years. So the perception was, push him hard enough and he'll back down. Then somebody must have got a hold of him. Maybe Dick Norris, his spiritual advisor, got a hold of him and said, Bill, you got to start taking a stand on issues here. And he did. He took a stand on the North American Fair Trade Treaty, other issues, and the perception started to change. And then, of course, with the scandal, it all just went away again. My wife and I got to meet Bill Clinton at the White House. This was when they were pushing that federal health care plan, which I characterized as social medicine, and they got some of the speakers who were working in healthcare at the time together to give us a briefing, hoping that we'd be so sold on the program that we'd be around the country speaking up for it. Well, I was raised under social medicine in England. I don't like it. We won the war, but we lost our teeth, you know. So I didn't want to say anything that would constitute an endorsement. What I wanted to say was, Bill, could I ask you something? What do you see in socialism that the Russians missed? Thought that might be pushing my First Amendment rights a little far. So I said, well, good luck, Mr. President. Don't let him get you down. And he looked me straight in the eyes. He read my name badge, and he said, Roger, if you'll stay with me, I'll be there. And I said, I'll be there, Mr. President. I'll be there. Which brings us to charismatic power, which he has in just enormous abundance. That portrayal of him by John Travolta in Primary Colors as a legendary politician who just loves to wade into the crowd and win them over one at a time. That's Bill Clinton to a T. But it's what tripped Gerald Ford up. That was my little alertness. He was never able to develop the pizzazz to put it across with. John F. Kennedy had all 4. The next president we have with all 4 is Ronald Reagan. And if you look at our present president, you see him developing these four areas. You can have that kind of power over people too. If you'll work on these 8, particularly these 4, you'll see a transformation in your ability to influence people. All power is subjective. Think of Nelson Mandela in jail in South Africa for 27 years. It's hard for us to comprehend being in jail for 27 years, isn't it? But when President de Klerk said, great news, we're going to release you, he said, no, you're not. I will not accept release unless you're willing to negotiate apartheid. We have power if we think we have power, even if we really don't have it. We don't have power if we don't think we have it, even if we really do have it, which is a fancy way of saying that power is subjective. It's in the mind. Let's talk about some middle negotiating gambits before we take our break. Higher authority, you would think that if you were going out to negotiate something, you would want to have the authority to make a decision in the negotiations. I know what I'm doing, you say to your sales manager, just let me negotiate the best deal I can. In reality, you put yourself in a weakened negotiating position when you do that. You're better off not to have the authority, or if you do, don't let the other side know that you have the authority. You should always have a vague, higher authority behind you that you have to check with. Don't make it an individual. If you say to the buyer, well, my sales manager would have to approve that, what's the first thought the buyer's going to have? Oh, yeah, let me talk to the sales manager. Why am I wasting time talking to you if you can't make a decision? The vague higher authority appears to be unapproachable. In all the years that I said to people at the real estate company, I need to run this by my board of directors for final approval, I only once ever had a salesperson say to me, when does your board of directors meet? When can I make a presentation to them? So maintain that vague higher authority. Don't make it an individual. On the other side of the coin, you want to remove their resort to higher authority. You don't want to take a proposal to them and have them say, well, thanks for bringing the proposal. I'll take it to the committee, and if we're interested, we'll give you a call. Where do you go from there? You want to remove their resort to higher authority. So initially, we just make a pass at it. Before we get the proposal out of a briefcase, we say, look, I don't mean to put any pressure on you. This, in terms of hidden meanings in conversation, is called a preparer. There's a whole tape on that in the home study course. Things to listen for when you're dealing with people. It's a preparer. It prepares them for pressure. You've just given yourself permission to put pressure on them. I don't mean to put pressure on you, but this item is in really short supply right now. Could I just ask you this? If this proposal that we have for you meets all of your needs, now that's as broad as any statement can be, right? If this proposal meets all of your needs, is there any reason why you couldn't make a decision right away? That's a fairly harmless thing for them to say okay to. But look at what you've accomplished. If you can just get them to laugh and say, well, sure, meets all of my needs, I'll give you a decision right now. Number one, you've eliminated their right to say, I want to think about it. If they say that, you say, well, let me go over it one more time. There must be something I didn't explain thoroughly enough, because you did indicate you could make a decision. And secondly, you've eliminated their resort to say, I need to take it to the committee. So initially, we make a pass at that. Let's assume, for our purposes, it doesn't work. And they said, no, regardless of what the proposal is, we've got a committee making the decision. I can't make the final decision. Now let me give you 3 counter gambits to go through when you run into that. Number one, appeal to the person's ego. But they always follow your recommendations, don't they? Now, once in a while you get lucky. Once in a while you're dealing with such a huge ego that they simply cannot resist that. You'll say, well, yes, yeah, it's just a formality, really, yes. So once in a while you get lucky. But let's assume that doesn't work either. And they say, well, you know, they listen to me, but I can't give you a decision until I've taken it to them. Step number 2, get their commitment that they will recommend it to the higher authority. But you will recommend it to them, won't you? They can only say one of 2 ways. They can say yes, or they can say no. The hoped-for response is, well, yes, it looks like a fair proposal, sure. I'll see what I can do for you with them. But the other thing that can happen at this point is an objection is raised. Something comes out of the woodwork. Well, I got to tell you, one of our committee members had a bad experience with your company in the past, or one of our committee members thinks that you're too small a company to handle an order of this size, or something comes out of the woodwork. Now, as you know, anytime you can raise an objection, you should say, this is great. Objections are buy-in signals, right? Only the most neophyte salesperson thinks that objections are the problem. Objections are not the problem. Objections are buy-in signals. Indifference is your problem. I would rather they said to you, we wouldn't buy from you if you were the last supplier on the planet, because I'd rather they said that to you than, no, I don't want to talk about it. We're happy with our present supply. I just don't want to talk about it. Indifference is your problem, not objections. Let me prove this to you. Raise your hand if you've never been married. Somebody who's never been married. Okay, the gentleman in the white shirt here. What's your name? Tom, okay? Bob, excuse me. Questions get easier as we go along, Bob. Bob, I want you to give me the opposite of a word. If I say day, you say night. If I say white, you say black. Got the idea? Bob, what's the opposite of love? Hate, right? Those of us who have been married know better than that, don't we? Married people, what's the real opposite of love? Indifference, right? They simply don't care anymore. Bob, as long as they're throwing plates at you, you got something there you can work with. They still care. It's when they're saying to you, like Rhett battling Gone with the Wind, frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. That's when you know the movie's about over. So, now particularly if their objection is price. If they think you charge too much, you should say, wow, this is terrific, I'm halfway there. Because only people who want to do business with you care about your price. For a while, I dated a woman who was studying interior design. She took me down to the Orange County Design Center to show me a couch she wanted us to buy. She sat me down on the couch. She said, isn't it a wonderful couch? I said, no question about it. It is a marvelous couch. She said, feel the leather. I feel the leather. It's covered in Italian kid skin, softest leather I've ever felt. She said, it's only $12,000. I said, how can they do it for only $12,000? And she said, you don't have a problem with the price? I said, no, I don't have a problem with the price at all. Why don't I have a problem with the price? You got it. Not paying $12,000 for a couch. I don't care what they covered it with. Now, if I were interested in buying the couch, would I have a problem with the price? Oh, you better believe it. So in step number 2, when you say you will recommend it to them, won't you? Either they'll say, yes, I will, which is great, or no, I won't because, raise an objection, and that's not bad either. Then step number 3, the qualified subject to close. Now, there are 29 different closing tactics. All closing tactics do is get a decision faster than they would otherwise make it. Closing tactics don't make somebody who doesn't want to buy from you. All they do is they move the decision up a little bit. And the subject to close is the same one that your life insurance agent uses on you when he says, frankly, I don't know if we can get this much insurance on someone of your age. It would be subject to you passing the physical anyway. So let's just set you up for a free physical and we'll write up the paperwork subject to you passing the physical. It doesn't sound as though you've made a decision, as big a decision as you really have. In reality, they know that if during that physical you can fog a mirror, they can find somebody somewhere that will underwrite that policy. You really have bought. So these are the 3 steps you go through when you have trouble getting them to remove their resort to higher authority. Splitting the difference. The rule here is never offer to split the difference. Encourage the other side to offer to split the difference. Let's say you're selling something and you are at $70,000 and they're at $68,000. And you know if you said to them, let's split the difference, they say, okay, 69, that sounds fair, let's do it. It's such a tempting way out of the negotiation because it's such an easy way to conclude the negotiations. Power negotiators never offer to split the difference. We encourage the other side to offer to split the difference. We say, look, how far apart are we on this? We're not that far apart, are we? Well, I guess we're $2,000 apart. Well, surely if we're only $2,000 apart, there's got to be some middle ground somewhere, doesn't there, where we can put this together? And if you keep that up long enough, sooner or later they will suggest splitting the difference. They'll say, look, why don't we just split the difference? You say, let's see, we were at 70, you were at 68, so you're proposing 69. Is that what I hear you say? Well, yeah, if you'll agree to 69, we'll go along with that. Okay, let me talk to my people, vague higher authority. I'll tell him you propose 69. Hopefully you can put this together. Let me get back to you tomorrow. Now, there's always a chance that you could get back the next day and get them to split the difference again. You could say, never talked so hard to my people in all my life. I told them you proposed 69,000. It's just saying we can't afford to come a penny under 70. But golly, we're only $1,000 apart. I mean, surely, I know, don't call me Shirley. Surely, if we're only $1,000 apart, there's got to be some middle ground somewhere, doesn't there? And maybe you'll get them to split the difference again, and you've just made another $500 of bottom line profit out of the deal. But even if you don't, even if you end up at the same $69,000 that you would have done if you'd have suggested splitting the difference, something very significant happened here. What was the significant thing that happened because you did it this way? Well, they felt that they won, Bob, because they proposed the $69,000 and you reluctantly agreed to their proposal. If you'd have said, let's split the difference, now you've put that 69 out there, you're going to try and force them to agree to a proposal that you have made. Now, that may seem like a very subtle thing to you, but it's very significant in terms of who felt they won and who felt they lost in the negotiations. So never offer to split the difference, encourage the other side to. Yes, you say, how far are we apart in this? We're not that far apart, are we? And they say, well, you know, we're $2,000 apart. Well, surely, if we're only $2,000 apart, there's got to be some middle ground somewhere. Just nurse them into doing that. The declining value of services. The value of a material thing can go up because of scarcity or inflation. The value of a service always appears to go down rapidly once that service has been performed. It teaches you that if you are on a consulting basis, you negotiate your fee up front, not afterwards. It teaches you that if you are you make a concession in the negotiation, get a reciprocal concession right away. Don't be sitting there thinking, well, I did that for them, they'll make it out to me later. With all the goodwill in the world, it's not going to happen because of this principle. Plumbers know this, don't they? Do you ever know a plumber come out to your house and start work before they negotiated the fee? Had a plumber out to the house. He said, Mr. Dawson, I know what the problem is. I can fix it for you. It'll cost you $150. I said, fine, go ahead. You know how long it took him to do the work? 5 minutes. I said, wait a minute, you're going to charge me $150 for 5 minutes work? I'm a nationally known speaker and I don't make that kind of money. And he said, well, I didn't make that kind of money either when I was a nationally known speaker. This is the hot potato. This is when somebody has a problem, they'd like it to become your problem. We got this a lot in real estate. It was the buyer who would say, we only have $10,000 to put down. That was not our problem, that was their problem. They were trying to toss us their problem and make it ours. And I would teach the agents what the international negotiators say about this. The international negotiators will say, the moment the other side tries to give you what is essentially their problem, you need to test it for validity right away. You've got to jump on it right now and find out whether it's a deal killer. Don't be showing these buyers property for 3 days and then tell them they've got to come up with a bigger down payment. Test it right away and say, fine, maybe we can find something for $10,000 down, but could I just ask you this? If we find exactly the right home for you in exactly the right neighborhood, it's exactly what you're looking for. It's a sensational bargain, but it takes $15,000 to get in. Is there any point in showing it to you, or should we just show it to our other buyers? Amazing how fast people can conjure up another $5,000 when you put it like that. Very often they'd say, well, we do have some additional savings. We'd only want to use it if it's a really good buy. And immediately you know that problem they tried to give you is not the deal killer that it appeared to be up front. So test for validity right away. I always remember being up in Anchorage, Alaska. I was at the Hilton Hotel there. I needed a late checkout, so I went down to the lobby, and two young people standing right next to each other behind the reception desk. And I said to one of them, would you please give me a 6 o'clock checkout in my room? And she said, well, Mr. Dawson, we could do that, but of course we'd have to charge you for an extra half day. So, testing for validity, I said, well, who has the authority to waive that charge? And she said, she would. The person standing right next to her. I said, well, how would you feel about that? And she said, oh, sure, we can do that. Don't worry about it. Go right ahead. So sometimes it's that simple. Don't let other people give you their problems. Trading off. When I trained the people at Xerox Corporation in Rochester, now they have a big training center in Leesburg, Virginia, but up in Rochester they have what they call a key account division. These are the people who sell to their very biggest customers. Their vice president came out to me afterwards and said, Roger, that thing you taught us about trading off is the most valuable thing I've ever learned in any seminar. That is going to save us hundreds of thousands of dollars because we get that all the time. And here's what I said. Anytime you ask for a small concession, ask for something in return. Say, if we can do that for you, what can you do for us? So let's say you sell equipment that needs to be installed. It's scheduled to be installed on the 25th of the month. They call you up and they say, is there any way you can move that up a couple of days? No problem to you at all. You'd be happy to do it. But instead of saying, sure, we can do that, you say, let me talk to my installation people, very high authority, and see how they feel about that. But let me ask you this. If we can do that for you, what can you do for us? Three things can happen here. Number one, you may just get something. They may be so concerned about this that say, well, that extended warranty policy that you talked about, well, we'll go ahead and buy that from you, or we'll put you on an automatic replenishment for supplies if you can do that for us. So you may just get something out of it. It's not the real reason. The second thing that happens, more important, is it elevates the value of the concession. Why just give something away when you're negotiating? Why not make a big deal out of it? You may need that later on for another trade-off. Later on, you're able to say to them, hey, you know how hard I had to talk to my people about that, rescheduling that installation? Now look, don't give us a problem with the payment, right? Don't make us wait for our money. Cut me the check today, will you? You can use this as another trade-off later on. But the third reason is the key reason, and it's this. It stops the grinding away process. If they know that every time they ask you for something, you will very gently, very politely ask for something in return, it stops them constantly coming back for more. Okay, take your seats. We'll get started again. We're going to talk about the 3 stages of every negotiation. I'm going to teach you how hostage negotiators resolve these problems smoothly. And although it's unlikely that you'll ever be involved in a situation like this where you've got a gunman holding a gun on a hostage, if you can learn how to handle this, you'll be able to handle anything that's likely to come up in the way of an angry person in your business. We didn't think much about hostage negotiating in this country until two things happened fairly close together. One was the Attica State Prison riot, where the negotiations were bungled and 32 people died that didn't have to. And then we had the Munich Olympic massacre, which still stands out as the most bungled hostage negotiation of all time. They did just everything wrong there. And at that point, the New York Police Department and the FBI said, I think we better learn how to handle hostage situations because it looks like we're going to be getting more of them. They worked on this plan. They field tested it. It took them over 2 years to perfect it. It's so good that if you're taken hostage in this country, it is very unlikely that you will be harmed. The life expectancy of the perpetrators is not good, but very unlikely that the hostages will be harmed. I think you had one just a couple of weeks ago in Ohio, didn't you? Wasn't that Ohio where somebody got caught robbing a bank and they took hostages? I know I was following this, and I wasn't the least bit concerned that these hostages will be harmed because they know how to do it. The first thing they do is they isolate the perpetrator. They assign a primary negotiator to this, and this will be the only contact the perpetrator will have with the outside world. They can't pick up a phone and call a radio station. They're not visible to television cameras. Their communication to the outside world is through this one person. Now, in business, that translates to get the person into an office with the door closed and let them yell. Let them express their opinion. Let them reduce the tension a little bit. I remember, I'm going back 30 years now, I guess, but I was a merchandise manager at the Montgomery Ward store in Bakersfield, California. We had 2 Cadillacs parked out by the auto service center. One was in for a brake job, the other was in for an alignment job. And the alignment mechanic raced out of the parking lot. He jumped into the wrong Cadillac. He gunned it up onto the alignment rack. He hit the brakes. Nothing happened. This car nosedived over the far end of the alignment rack, demolishing the front end of this car. Now, when the owner came in to pick it up from servicing and saw what we had done to his beautiful car, come storming out to my office to complain, he was not about to calmly sit down and start a productive negotiation over this. No, he wanted to dump on me for 15 minutes about the idiots we had working down there. Well, that's fine. Let them blow off steam if they have to, but don't make any concessions to the other side until you have got them to tell you what it is they want. This is called establishing criteria. Find out what they want. Do they want $100,000? Do they want the release of some prisoners somewhere? Do they want you to publish their manifesto in the New York Times the way the Unabomber did? Do they want you to broadcast that tape on a radio network the way that David Koresh in Waco, Texas did? Get them committed to a position. Then you can communicate back what you're prepared to do or not prepared to do. And if you don't have a meeting of the minds, then you go on to stage 2. Well, you don't have to be in a hostage situation to see this going wrong. I remember speaking for one of the national real estate franchise companies at their annual meeting. The morning was a huge award ceremony, plaques and trophies for all the top producers of the year. As they broke for lunch, I saw one of these brokers come storming up to the front of the room. He grabbed a hold of the vice president of the franchise, and he said, well, you did it to me again. One of my top producers didn't get that trophy. How am I supposed to keep my people motivated if you don't give them recognition? Well, he caught the vice president in a bad moment. The vice president snapped back and said, you know why he didn't get his trophy? Because you didn't turn your sales report in on time. Yes, I did. No, you didn't. Yes, I did. No, you didn't. You've been with us 5 years. I don't think you've ever turned a report in on time. And the fight was on. The people who were lined up trying to talk to the vice president started drifting away in embarrassment. Pretty soon, this thing has turned into a screaming match. And the broker is saying, well, I'm going to quit the franchise. I'm going to pull all the salespeople out. We're leaving. And the vice president is saying, if that's all the loyalty we've got from you, we're probably better off without you. Major escalation of the situation, when all that it really took was for the vice president to stay calm and say, wow, I'm sorry he didn't get his trophy. What is it you would like me to do? Well, give him some recognition at the luncheon today, would you? Well, if I do that for you, what will you do for me? And the whole thing would have been over. But don't we see that kind of escalation all the time? You're going to your office at your company, 2 of your people are over by the water cooler arguing about something. You say, whoa, this is pretty intense. We better find out what this is all about. You go over there and you cannot believe the little thing they're arguing about. One of them borrowed the other one's stapling gun and didn't give it back to them, or some little thing that's all blown out of proportion. In our personal lives with our spouses and children, something is said, the wrong response is made, pretty soon the whole thing is flared up. We never meant for it to get that bad. We just don't know how to pull back from the positions that we have taken in the negotiations. The art of conflict resolution is the art of getting people off of the positions they've taken, focused back on their mutual interests. Now, positions can be 180 degrees apart. You lied to me. No, I didn't. You cheated me. No, I didn't. You overcharged me. No, I didn't. These are 180 degrees apart. You still have huge mutual interest in doing business with this person. You can't see it when you're focused on these positions out here. Now, the classic example of that was the Cold War. We took very strong positions. We're calling the Soviet Union an evil empire. They're pounding their shoe on the United Nations table saying, we're going to bury you, we're going to bury you. These are very strong positions that are 180 degrees apart. We still had huge mutual interest, but we couldn't see it anymore. We had a huge mutual interest in reducing military expenditure. We had a huge mutual interest in doing trade together. They had all that titanium. We needed it for our golf clubs. But we couldn't see that while we were focused on these positions. So the art of conflict resolution is to get people off of the positions they've taken, focus back on their mutual interests. Positions can be 180 degrees apart, but mutual interests are still very strong. So now both sides understand where they stand on the issue, what they're prepared to do or not prepared to do. Then we go on to stage 2, which is seek information. The secondary officer, or the secondary hostage officer, is the information officer. That person is there for one reason and one reason only, and that is to find out all they can about this situation, about the perpetrators. Who is this? Are they part of an organized group? Have they ever made this threat before? Have they ever followed through before? What religion are they? Is there a priest or minister or rabbi we can call in? Where is their family? And so on. Now that would seem fairly obvious, but it doesn't happen. Out in Los Angeles, we had the Great Rodeo Drive holdup. That's the swanky shopping street in Beverly Hills where Cartier and Tiffany and Gucci are located. A fellow walking down Rodeo Drive one day with a gun in his pocket. Now this, as you may have heard, is not an unusual part of life in Los Angeles. We are used to this. Jay Leno said the air has been so clear in Los Angeles this week, we can see those bullets coming from miles away. Remember when we had the freeway shootings? One hot August, everybody got irritated. They're driving down the freeway shooting at each other. Overnight, we had bumper stickers on the back of our cars that said, "Cover me, I'm changing lanes." It has just become part of our milieu. So this fellow walks into Van Cleef & Arpels, the jewelry store. He pulls a gun out of his pocket. The guard on the front door of the store panics and locks the door of the store with them all inside. Now, here's a multiple choice question for you. Is that A, dumb, B, stupid, C, idiotic, D, all of the above? Understand they have a sign on Van Cleef & Arpels' lunchroom wall now that says, first you leave the store, then you lock the gunman in. The sign alarm alerted the Beverly Hills Police. I think they trained by watching Eddie Murphy movies. They called out every SWAT team in Southern California, Special Weapons Attack Team. Pretty soon they had a gunman on the rooftop of every building all the way down. They had this entire 2-block shopping street completely barricaded off for 3 days over this incident. The merchants were going out of their minds. They were losing a fortune. They were passing the hat trying to raise bail for this guy, anything to get back into business. On the 3rd day, they finally had this young man in custody, and until they did, they didn't know who he was. They hadn't gone through the information gathering process. So in stage 1, we get them committed to a position. In stage 2, we start to gather information. Now, very often, you'll find out that what they told you was the big problem is not really the big problem. Now, employers, that's particularly true if you've got a person who's quitting because they can make more money somewhere else. When you go through these stages, you find out really money's not the issue. Something else is going on there that you haven't found out about yet. Then and only then do you go to what most people think of as negotiating, which is the reach for compromise part of it, looking for areas where you can give a little bit, they can give a little bit, and it doesn't affect your major positions in the negotiation. Now, I want to go through this one more time because it's going to help you an awful lot the next time you've got an angry person on your hands. The gentleman here in the white shirt, you're married, are you? Yes. Okay, what's your name? Paul. That's my middle name. Okay, I can remember that. Is it okay if I pick on Paul? Yeah, take him. All your friends are here, right? I'll take him, not me. I'm going to put Paul through this, but I want you to see how you would react if you were in this situation. Paul, it's Sunday afternoon. You're in your living room in your favorite armchair watching your favorite program on television. What would that be? What? Work with me, Paul. Work with me. Come on. Discovery Channel. Okay, you're watching the Discovery Channel. In one hand, you've got the channel change of the commercials. In the other hand, you've got your favorite drink. What would that be? apple juice. How is life in the fast lane? Okay, the program is interesting. The apple juice tastes great. Everything in the world is wonderful until you hear this car coming at high speed. It's roaring down the highway, squirrels around the corner of your street on two wheels, comes into your driveway at 50 miles an hour, comes to a screeching, skidding halt in front of the garage. You hear the car door fly open, slam shut, the front door of the house bursts open. Your wife storms into the living room and she says, "Paul, you've done it to me again." What do you respond? Done what? You get the feeling Paul's been there before? Done what? Okay, give me some other reasons, other suggestions here. You've done it to me again. What are you going to say? Bob, what are you going to say? You've done it to me again. This is why you're a bachelor, right? You don't have to go through this stuff. What did I do? Okay. Any other suggestions for Paul? Now what? Okay. Be careful that doesn't extend into now what's your problem. You can say what's the problem, but never say what's your problem. Because they'll say, well, that's the problem, you see. The problem is you don't understand the problem. I mean, if you understand what the problem was, we wouldn't be having this problem. That's exactly the problem. You don't understand the problem, so don't get that started. Okay, are we all agreed then that what happened, what did I do is a little confessionary, Bob, but why are you upset? Something like that is the correct response. Anybody disagree with that? Because this is all information gathering. See, that's stage 2. What happened? Why are you upset? What did I do? This is all information gathering, and that's stage 2. Paul, never stage 2 an angry woman until you stage 1 her. What's stage 1? Find out what she wants, right? Now, we got to phrase this a little more delicately under the circumstances. You look up with an innocent expression on your face, Paul. Do you do innocent? I can see you're upset. Now, that's got to be the understatement of the year, right? I can see you're upset. What is it you would like me to do? Now, she may say to you, Paul, I want you to apologize to my mother. Hand me the phone. You can handle this during a commercial break. You don't have to put your apple juice down to resolve this problem. Because you found out what she wanted. Now, on the other hand, Paul, she might say to you, Paul, after what I heard about you at that convention in Las Vegas, you better be talking about taking me down to the Cadillac dealership. That's what you better be talking about doing. Now, Paul, you can move to stage 2, information gathering. What on earth did you hear? Not what did I do? You know what you did. You need to find out what she knows. See how eager we are to jump that first step. We just hate asking people what they want because we think if we ask them what they want, we have to give it to them. You do not have to give it to them. It does 2 very important things. Number 1, it opens up the mind of the possibility of a negotiated settlement. That customer may have come storming into your office thinking, lawsuit, lawsuit, lawsuit. And the minute you say, hey, wait a minute, we want to put this right. What would it take to put it right? You've opened up the mind of the possibility of a negotiated settlement. The other thing that it does is it puts parameters on the demands. The demands can't escalate from that point on. You see, the real danger, if you're customer service conscious, as you need to be in today's world, and you say, well, don't worry about it, we'll just write the bill off. And they say, oh, that wasn't very hard, and I still feel angry inside. Oh, by the way, we're not happy with the way that last shipment was handled either. We want you to do something about that. And all of a sudden, the demands start to escalate. I know this sounds backwards to you. You all want to gather the information first and then go on to find out what they want. But the next time you've got an angry person on your hands, try it this way. Try it the way the professional hostage negotiators do it. And I think you'll find things will drop into place for you. When you give people what they want, they'll give you what you want. That's the essence of win-win negotiating. Okay, on to ending negotiating gambits. Good guy, bad guy. I'm sure you've all seen the old police movies where the suspect is brought in for interrogation. And the first detective to interrogate him is a rough, tough, mean-looking guy, threatens him with all kinds of things they're going to do. He's mysteriously called away to take a phone call. The second detective who's brought in to look after the prisoner is just the warmest, nicest person in the world. And he sits down with the prisoner and he says, listen, kid, it's really not that bad. I think they're just trying to scare you. I know the ropes around here. Why don't you let me see what I can do for you with them? And it's a real temptation to think that the good guy's on your side when, of course, he's really not. Then he would go ahead and close on what your salespeople would recognize as a minor point close. I think all the detectives really need to know is where did you buy the gun? What they really want to know is where did you bury the body, but it's a lot easier when you start out with a minor point and then move up from there. This is used on you a lot more than you might believe. Look out for it anytime you're dealing with two people. It could be husband and wife, vice president, president, partners. Chances are you'll see some variation of this being used on you. You've made an appointment to meet with a buyer at a company. Do your suppliers, the president of the company comes in and wants to listen in on this. That's negotiating 2-on-1, which is not good. You normally try to equalize the size of the negotiating teams. But you go along and everything seems to be going along fine until all of a sudden the president starts getting irritated and stands up and says to the buyer, look, I don't think these people are interested in making a serious proposal to us. I'm sorry, I've got things to do, and storms out of the room. This really shakes you up if you're not used to negotiating. Then the buyer says, well, sometimes he gets away. It's kind of hard to deal with, but I'd really like to see us put this together with you. I think if you could just be a little bit more flexible on your prices, I still think we could put this together. Tell you what, why don't you let me see what I can do for you with the president? Unless you realize what they're doing to you, you will hear yourself saying, what do you think you could get the president to go along with? And pretty soon you'll have the buyer negotiating for you, and he or she is not even on your side. Now, if you think I'm exaggerating on this, true confession time, haven't we all at one time or another said to an appliance salesman or a car salesperson, what do you think you could get your sales manager to agree to? Haven't we all at one time or another been buying real estate, and we have a real estate agent representing us as the buyer, and we find the property we want to buy, and we turn to our agent and we say, what do you think you can get the sellers to accept? Well, let me ask you something. Who is your agent working for? Who's paying your agent? It's not you, right? They're working for the sellers, yet they've effectively played good guy, bad guy with you. So you run into an awful lot. And it's very, very powerful. This is what Carter and Reagan got the hostages out of the embassy in Tehran with. Do you remember that? Carter's lost the election, so he's eager to get the hostages out before Reagan got into office and took credit for their release. So he's playing good guy, bad guy with the Ayatollah. He's saying, hey, if I were you, I'd settle this thing with me. I wouldn't take a chance on this new team coming into office. Have you taken a look at these guys? President's a former cowboy actor. Vice President's head of the CIA. Secretary of State is Alexander Haig. These guys are crazier than Englishmen. There's no telling what they might do. If I were you, I'd settle it with me. Reagan, playing along with it, said, hey, if I were you, I'd settle it with Carter because he's a nice guy. You're not going to like what I have to say about it when I get into the White House. And look, when did we see those hostages being released? On the morning of Reagan's inauguration. That's how effective good guy, bad guy can be. So look out for people using that on you. Here's the counter tactic. Identify the tactic. It's such a well-known tactic. Charles Dickens wrote about it in Great Expectations. Such a well-known tactic that when you say to them, oh, come on, you're not going to play good guy, bad guy with me, are you? They get embarrassed that they got caught and they'll back off. A couple of other tactics. One would be create a bad guy of your own. You say to them, yeah, I understand how upset you are, but remember, I got to sell this to my people, and they are really tough to deal with right now. You might even forestall it. Let's say they show up with their attorney in tow and you weren't expecting it. When everybody's standing around getting a cup of coffee before the meeting starts, you just go up to their attorney and say, look, I know, I realize you're probably here to play the bad guy role in this, but let's not do that. Let's see if we can work it out without any friction. Fair enough? And you stop it from even getting started. Nibbling. Nibbling says that you can get things at the end of the negotiation that you can't get earlier on in the negotiation. Let's say that children are brilliant nibblers, aren't they? My daughter Julia, when she graduated from high school, she had 3 things on her negotiating agenda for a high school graduation gift. Number 1, she wanted to get a 5-week trip to Europe. Number 2, $1,200 in spending money. Number 3, a new set of luggage. Now, she was smart enough not to ask for everything up front. She closed me on this all-expense-paid trip waited a couple of weeks, came back and showed me in writing the recommended spending money, got me to commit to that. Right at the last minute, just as she was getting ready to go, she came to me and she said, "Dad, you wouldn't want me going to Europe with that radio set of luggage, which all the kids will be there with new luggage." And she got that too. If she'd have asked for everything up front, I would have negotiated out the luggage, negotiated down the spending money. Now, what's going on here? Why is this such an effective negotiating technique? A couple of psychologists did a study up at a racetrack in Canada. They were studying the attitudes of people immediately before they placed a bet versus immediately after they placed a bet. What they found out was before they placed the bet, they were uptight, anxious, unsure they were doing the right thing. Now, I want you to relate that to a buyer. You're doing business with this company for the first time. They're uptight, anxious, unsure about doing the right thing. The minute they made the decision to go ahead and place the bet anyway, all of a sudden their attitude changed completely. Now they felt good about what they'd just done and were tempted to go back and double the bet before the race started. Why? Because the mind works to reinforce decisions it has made earlier. The process of decision-making is you fight the decision up until the point you make it. But once you've made it, you want to do things to reinforce that decision that you made earlier. That's why very often people agree to things later on in the negotiation that they won't agree to earlier. So let's say you sell equipment that involves an expensive service maintenance contract, and you raise it early on in your sales presentation, but they say, no, we never do that. We can afford to have it repaired if we have any problems with it. So rather than risk the whole sale over this, you back off of that. What I'm saying is after you've reached agreement on the purchase of the equipment, nibble for that service maintenance agreement. You say, look, could we take another look at that service maintenance agreement? I think what you're missing there is the preventive maintenance factor. And if your people can call us anytime they've got a problem with it, we come out, we catch problems before they get serious to be serious problems. Your equipment will last a lot longer if you have a service maintenance contract on it. I don't recommend it for everybody, quite frankly, but in your situation, I really, really think it's what you should be doing. People are not persuaded by the amount of logic you give them. That's why engineers can't sell. They keep piling on the logic. People are persuaded by how strongly you can convince them, how strongly you can communicate your feelings that this is the right thing for them to do. So you've got a good chance of them agreeing to it later on. On the other hand, you've got to look out for people nibbling on you. There's a point in the negotiation where you're very vulnerable, and that point is when you think the negotiations are all over. I bet you've all been the victim of a nibble at one time or another. You've been selling a car or a boat, you're finally feeling good because you found the buyer. Pressure and the tension of the negotiations has drained away. They're sitting there writing out the check, and just as they're about to sign their name, they look up and they say, "That does include a full tank of gas, doesn't it?" You're at your most vulnerable point for two reasons. Number one, you've just made a sale and you're feeling good. And when you feel good, you tend to give things away that you otherwise wouldn't. Secondly, you're thinking, oh no, I thought this was all over. I thought this was all resolved. I don't want to have to go back to the start of this, renegotiate the whole thing, maybe lose it all. Maybe I'm better off to give in on this little point. So look out for buyers nibbling on you. You've made the sale, you're feeling good, they're saying, I've just got to call down and get a purchase order number for you. And they put their hand over the phone and say, oh, you will give us 90-day turns, won't you? Your competitors will. And you're very, very vulnerable. The counter tactic to the nibble when they do it to you is to gently make them feel cheap, penurious if you prefer. Now, you've got to be careful how you do this because you are at a sensitive point in the negotiations. You don't want to upset them. You've got to do it with a big grin on your face. Oh, come on. We put together a terrific package for you here. Don't make us wait for our money, too. Fair enough? And just keep on going. So that's the counter tactic. Gently make them feel cheap. This is the number one pressure point in negotiations. If you said to me, Roger, I can't stay for your session seating because I got this big negotiation to go to, give me one thing that would make me a more powerful negotiator. This is it. Power goes to the person who's projecting that they're prepared to walk away if they can't get what they want. Now, be clear here, the objective is not to walk away. I don't want any one of you calling me and saying, Roger, you'd be so proud of me, I just walked away from $1 million deal. No, the objective is to get what you want because the other side is convinced you're going to walk if they don't make that concession to you. When my daughter Julia bought her first car, she went down to the car dealership, BMW dealership, and test drove a really nice used car, fell in love with the car. They knew she'd fallen in love with the car. And then she came back and she wanted me to go back down with her and renegotiate a better price. On the way down there, I said, Julia, are you prepared to come home tonight without the car? And she said, no, I'm not. I want it. I want it. I said, well, Julie, if you feel that way, here's what you do. Get your checkbook out. Give them what they're asking. Because if you're not prepared to walk away, you've already set yourself up to lose in the negotiation. We've got to convince them that we're prepared to walk away. We spent 2 hours negotiating this car. We walked out of the showroom twice during those 2 hours and finally got the car for $2,000 less than she was prepared to pay for the car. Now, let me ask you something. How much money was she making while she was negotiating, bearing in mind that I waived my normal fee? $1,000 an hour. We go to work for $1,000 an hour. You cannot make money faster than you can when you're negotiating. It's the highest and best use of your time. In a serious situation, protect yourself with good guy, bad guy. If you're in a multi-million-dollar negotiation and you walk out hoping they're going to stop you in the doorway and say, hey, come on back, you know we want to put this together, and they don't, they let you walk, you've got a problem getting back into the negotiations. But if there's two of you there, one can walk, and if they let you walk, the good guy's left behind to pull it all back together and say, well, he's kind of upset right now, but I still think we can pull this together. Why don't we see what we can do? So protect yourself with good guy, bad guy in a serious situation. Now, how do you give yourself walkaway power? You give yourself walkaway power by giving yourself options. The most important thing you can do before you go into a negotiation is to develop options. Let's say you've been transferred to a new town and you're looking for a new home. Your family's found the home you want to buy. It's the only home in town that will make them happy. The smartest thing you can do before you go into negotiations is to find 2 other houses you'd be almost as happy with. It doesn't mean you're not going to get the one you want. It does mean that you'll be a more powerful negotiator because you'll be with the seller and you're thinking, well, you know, I hope the seller will be reasonable with me, but if they're not, I've got these other options that look pretty good to me too. And the other side can always sense if you have options. So developing your options before you go in is the most important thing you can do. Now we're going to talk about a couple of problems that can come up in negotiations, impasses and deadlocks. Key issue here is don't confuse an impasse with a deadlock. Don't reach an impasse and think you've reached a deadlock. An impasse is when you're so far apart on a particular issue that you're thinking, if we're this far apart, it's never going to go together anyway. Why waste any more time on it? An impasse you handle with the set-aside technique. Now, if you haven't used the set-aside technique yet, you will be astonished how effective this is when you try it. You say, look, we're $20,000 apart on this, but let's just set that aside for a minute. We got some other things we need to talk about here. You create momentum with little issues, then when you come back to the major issue, you'll find it's a lot more resolvable than it appeared to be up front. Also, buyers can get pretty clever at using this on you. Sometimes you'll walk into a buyer and the buyer will say, look, I'm busy, I know you're busy too. I might as well tell you, I've already had 2 suggestions at the 2 proposals at this number. The suggestion being that if you don't make a concession, you're not even going to get into consideration. Don't let them do that to you. You say, oh, wait a minute, we got a lot to talk about before we can talk about money. Let's just set that issue aside. We got a lot to talk about. Let's talk about some of these other issues. Create momentum on the little issue, come back to the major issue later. If you do actually reach a deadlock, there is only one way to resolve a deadlock. My definition of a deadlock is when neither side sees any point in talking to each other anymore. The UPS strike a couple of years ago got to that point. They were having meetings. The meetings were non-productive, so they quit having meetings. The baseball strike last year didn't get to that point. They were having meetings all the way up until the Friday afternoon when they finally resolved the issues. So if you do actually reach a deadlock, the only way to resolve a deadlock, the only way, is to bring in a third person as a mediator or an arbitrator. Now, there's a big difference between the two. A mediator doesn't have a lot of power. They're there to facilitate a solution. And you go into mediation with an attitude of, we can work this out. We can make little concessions. We can mold something we can all live with. With arbitration, there is a winner and there is a loser. It's a totally different process. It's like going in front of a judge and a jury. It's just faster and it's cheaper. So there will be a winner and there will be a loser with arbitration. The arbitration will listen to the evidence and then say, okay, you were at fault there, you pay them that much to make up for it. So there's a winner and a loser with arbitration. If you're brought in to resolve a problem that one of your people is having with a customer, you would be a mediator, not an arbitrator. You don't have a lot of power. Now, a key issue here. Mediators and arbitrators must be perceived as neutral by both sides. They cannot be effective unless both sides see them as neutral. Alexis Herman, Clinton's Secretary of Labor, was helpful in the UPS strike because Clinton was perceived as reasonably neutral between management and labor. I don't think that Ray Donovan, who was Reagan's Secretary of Labor, he fired all the air traffic controllers and told them they'd never work for the federal government again. I don't think he could have been useful because Reagan was definitely not perceived as neutral between management and labor. Now, what's the chance that that outsider would perceive you as neutral if you're brought in to mediate a solution that you're a situation between one of your department heads and an outsider? What's the chance that the outsider would think of you as neutral? Not good, right? I mean, somewhere between 0 and 0. So you have to do something to service that perception of neutrality. Let's create a situation here. Your name, yes, you. What? You don't have to look at your name badge to tell me your name. What is it again? Pauline, okay, and you are? Linda, okay. Let's say that Pauline runs a department in my company and Linda's the outsider she's been having a problem with. And I'm going to try and mediate this situation. I come in and say, listen, I haven't had a chance to get involved in this yet. Why would I say that even though Linda's been filling me in for the last 2 weeks on the problems with Pauline, the perils of Pauline? Why would I say that? Neutrality, right? I cannot have made my mind up yet because I don't know what's going on. I haven't had a chance to get involved in this yet. Why don't you both explain your positions to me? Let me see if I can find something we can live with. So Linda, my department head, tells me her position. Pauline, the outsider, tells me her position. I immediately turn to my department head and say, look, are we being fair pushing that? Maybe we could give a little bit on that situation. What do you think? Now, she has to understand it's not because I'm not backing her up. I'm trying to get the customer thinking he seems to understand the problem a little better. Maybe we can find a solution to this after all. So you service that perception of neutrality with a very small concession made early on in the negotiations. Teach your people to bring you problems. A lot of your people don't like to bring you problems like that because they think they're saying to you, I'm not a good enough negotiator to handle this, I need a better negotiator. That's not the issue at all. There are just some dynamics about mediation that make it work well. Let's create another situation here. Let's, I better not pick on Paul again. He's gonna, it's a gentleman here, what's your name? Frank, okay, and you are? Jeff, okay? Frank and Jeff, neither one work for me, but they've been having this big brouhaha. They can't settle it, so they decided to hire me as a mediator to resolve the problem. So I can come into this and I can say to Frank, look, Frank, I don't know how Jeff would feel about this, but what if I could get Jeff to agree to this? And I can say to Jeff, I don't know how Frank would feel about this. What if I could get him to agree to that? If Jeff went to Frank and said, well, what if I were willing to do this? Frank immediately thinks, that's a step in the right direction. What more can I get him to give me? Also, there are some specific arbitration techniques. I can say to both of them, look, I don't think either one of you are being reasonable. I want you both to modify your positions, bring them to me, and now I've got them competing against each other to bring me an acceptable solution to the problem. Also, I can be 5 times more persuasive in dealing with them than they can in dealing with each other, because of the neutrality factor. You lose 80% of your ability to persuade people if the other person thinks you have something to gain from that attempt. If Jeff goes to Frank and tries to make a suggestion, Frank resists it because his assumption is this will benefit Jeff if he does that, and vice versa. But I'm correctly perceived as neutral, I can be 5 times more effective. Would you believe that a convict could be more persuasive than a district attorney? They did a study, they got an audience together, and the convict and the district attorney argued an issue to the audience, and they asked the audience who was the most effective persuader. And the convict won hands down because they were both arguing the district attorney should have more power than they do. When the district attorney tried to make that issue, the audience kind of said, well, sure, all district attorneys want to have more power. That doesn't make it right. When the convict said, I think district attorneys should have way more power than they do, there was a lot of credibility there because they didn't see that the convict had anything to gain from that. Got another audience together, the same 2 people argued an issue, and this time the district attorney won hands down because they were both arguing the district attorney should have less power. Can you imagine how far the convict got with that? I mean, the minute he got the words out of his mouth, the audience was thinking, well, of course convicts want district attorneys to have less power. When the district attorney said, I think this is completely out of hand, we've got way more power than we should, there's a lot of credibility there because they didn't perceive the district attorney had anything to gain from doing that. So you can be 5 times more persuasive if you're perceived as neutral than those two people can in dealing with each other. So the message there was, teach your people to bring you problems. It's not that they're having to come to a better negotiator. There are just some dynamics about mediation that make it work well. So that's impasses and deadlocks and how to handle them. Now we're going to do a little workshop exercise. It'll only take us about six minutes, but I want to resolve this problem for you. Sometimes you know that the sale is going to go together. You know that you're going to be doing business with this buyer, but at the last minute you realize that they are maneuvering to see if they can improve their situation a little bit. I'm going to show you how to handle it, but first of all I want to do this workshop exercise that will illustrate how something we do when we're negotiating causes the negotiations to deadlock. To do this, I need to break you up in pairs. So find a partner and decide who will be the buyer and who will be the seller in this negotiation. If you need a partner, raise your hand and we'll find one for you. Okay, you all know whether you're a buyer or seller? Okay, we need somebody who doesn't have a partner yet to be with this gentleman here. Okay, he's going to come over from... Okay, you're all set? All right. I'm going to put the buyer's instructions up on the screen first. So sellers, I need you to cover your eyes, look away, don't read this. This is just for the buyers. Just for the buyers. Here we go. If in the back you have trouble reading that, don't be bashful about coming forward so you can read it. Okay, it's switched off. Now the next one is for the sellers only, so buyers, I need you to cover your eyes, look away, don't read this. This is just for the sellers. Okay, switched off. Now, the sellers get to decide what the piece of equipment is. Use as many of the gambits I've taught you as you can, but you must complete in 6 minutes. I don't want to get through this and have anybody saying, well, you couldn't get together. You must make the sale. So sellers, turn to the buyers, describe the equipment, start the negotiation. You have 6 minutes. 10, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, time's up. Everybody go shh. Everybody go shh. Okay. Time's up. I've got a couple of questions for you. Question number 1, did you experience time pressure in a negotiation? Concessions come down under time pressure? Question number 2, how many of you were still negotiating at the end? You could not reach agreement in that time frame. I'm going to show you why that happened, but first of all, let me tell you what I told the buyers and the sellers. I told the buyers to start at 800, go to 900 if necessary. Please do not deviate from these instructions underlined. I told the sellers to start at 1,000, go down to 900 if necessary. Please do not deviate from these instructions underlined. So, let us now everybody go shh. Let us now identify the deviates. How many of you started at something other than 800 or 1,000? Okay. Now, do you understand why you have problems getting your people to follow instructions? If you followed instructions, there was only one point at which you could have reached agreement, and that was $900. Whether you were a buyer or a seller, you had a $100 negotiating range. So the issue there was, how did you make the concessions? because the way you make concessions creates a pattern of expectations in the other person's mind. If you conceded it in $25 increments like this, which is very common, look what the other side is thinking. They don't know how far they can push you. All they know is every time they push, they get another $25. They're going to keep on pushing. If you do $50, another $50, and then you say, no, can't give you more, you only gave me $100. Or if you hold out, and under time pressure make them an offer they can't refuse. In both of these two instances, the last concession you made before you cut them off was a big concession. And that creates hostility. Because now they're thinking, wait a minute, you just made a $50 concession, you won't give me another lousy $5. Why are you being so difficult? It creates hostility. Some of you just turned to the other person and said, well, I'll tell you what he told me. Now, that is called unilateral disarmament. In business, unilateral disarmament is the buyer who's saying to you, look, we don't like to negotiate at this company. We just don't think it's the fair way to conduct business. So you just give us your very best price and we'll tell you whether we'll accept it or not, because we don't like to negotiate. They're lying to you. They love to negotiate. That is negotiating. See if you can get them to make all of the concessions before the negotiations even start. Start with a reasonable concession, then taper down the size of the concessions. Now you're subliminally communicating to the other side that you've been pushed as far as you can be pushed. Just want to see how effective this is. Try it with your children. They come to you and they want $100 for some trip they're going on. You say, no way am I going to give you $100. Look, I'll tell you what, I'll give you $50, but no more. Can't do it for $50, they say. So we negotiate. Now we're at $60. Now we're at $65. Now we're at $67.50. You do not have to tell them this is as good as it's going to get. By tapering down the size of the concession, you subliminally communicated that you reached your bottom line. But power negotiators can do even better than that. Power negotiators know the art of taking a concession off the negotiating table. Now, you don't have to do this in a normal negotiation. This is just for people who are grinding away on you. And you don't do it with something big that could cause, could antagonize them. It's some little thing. You say, look, I know we were talking about those extra supplies being included, but now many people are telling me at this price, we're just going to have to charge you for those. Hopefully the response will be, wait a minute, we were negotiating in good faith. That's an expression only used by people who are not negotiating in good faith. And you said they were going to be included, and we expect them to be included. But they forget about pushing for all the other things that we're going to push for, as they realize if you're willing to take something off the negotiating table, you must have reached your bottom line. This must be the best that they can do. Sometimes you get, so you resolve that force into decision issue by taking a small item off the negotiating table, that arm wrestling problem. Sometimes you get this close to putting the thing together and it all starts to fall apart on you. And sometimes it's very hard for you to figure out why it's falling apart. You say, we've come all this way and we're only $1,000 apart. What's going wrong here? It's probably not the money that's causing the problem. It's the ego of the other person as a negotiator. You may not have realized this, but that buyer said to their boss, you just watch me get them down on price. I know what I'm doing. I'll negotiate them down. Don't worry about it. Now they're not doing as well as they thought they were going to do. And although they want to do it, they just can't bring themselves to do it because they don't want to feel they lost to you as a negotiator. So we've got to position them to make them feel good about giving in to us. And we do it with a very small concession made just at the last moment. The size of the concession can be ridiculously small. It's not the size of the concession, it's the timing. And we say, look, we absolutely cannot budge on the price. But I tell you what, go along with the price, and I'll personally supervise the installation for you to be sure there's no problems. Now, maybe you were going to do that anyway, but you've just been courteous enough so you can position them to where they can say, well, all right, if you'll do that for me, I'll go along with the price. And they don't feel they lost, they feel they traded something off. Never ever gloat when you get through negotiating. Never ever say, Harry, do you realize if you'd have hung in there a little bit longer, we were prepared to do this, this, and this. Because Harry will say unkind things about your mommy when you do that. Now, I know in a normal negotiation you would never think of doing that, but I tell you where you get into trouble. It's when you really know the buyer well. You've been playing golf with them for years. Now you're out on the golf course and you start to negotiate something. You're going back and forth, having fun doing it. And now you're back in the clubhouse and they're saying, okay, we're all agreed on this, but just for my own satisfaction, what was your real bottom line there? There's a temptation to brag a little bit. Don't do that. They will remember that for 20 years. You always congratulate. When you get through negotiating, however poorly you think they did, stand up, shake their hand, congratulate them on the fine negotiating job they did. Take a lesson from the attorneys down at the courthouse. They'll cut each other to ribbons inside the courtroom, but outside in the hallway at the end of the day, you'll see the district attorney go up to the defense attorney and say, "Wow, were you brilliant in there today. I realize your guy got 30 years, but that is the best closing argument I've ever heard," because they don't need any more friction than they've already got, right? Suppose you've heard the 3 reasons why scientists are using attorneys in experiments rather than rats. You've heard these, right? What's the first reason? There's just more of them out there, right? It's easier to find an attorney than it is the rat. The lab technicians don't become attached to the attorneys the way they do to the rats. And they've just found out that some things the rats just won't do. So those are the ending negotiating gabbets. Please do invest in the program. Let me become your coach in negotiating skills. We all need coaches these days, don't we? I mean, we've got somebody to come in and fix our computer for us because we can't understand it. We've got a golf coach to teach us how to play the game. We have financial coaches. Let me be your negotiating coach. Now, what do you pay these other coaches? You pay them a lot of money, don't you? What's a golf pro, $50 for a lesson? And CPAs and all that stuff. I charge you $8 an hour. If you'll figure out the price of the package, $199 is 26 hours of material in there. So it's $8 an hour, and I will go over the material with you as many times as you want me to until you've got it right. Now, I want to share a little secret with you, but I need to ask a favor. I'm going to tell you something now, and I don't want you to share it with anybody outside of this room. Could we do this? I make a little profit on the home study courses, not much at this price, but I do make a little profit. Bob, are you following me on this? Stay with me because this gets complicated. If you don't invest, I lose money. Are you still with me, Bob, on that? See, the problem is you lose too. See, you'll be in a situation one day where if these have been playing away in your car, you'd know exactly what to do. So you lose too. Got that, Bob? That's lose-lose, right? That's not our objective, is it? What's our objective, everybody? Win-win. Now, here's what really bothers me. If you do not invest, I know to the penny how much I'm going to lose. I just don't know how much you can lose. It could be thousands of dollars. So make that small investment. We guarantee that you'll double your money in 60 days. If your stockbroker called you and said, "I've got a blue chip investment, invest now. If you haven't doubled your money in 60 days, you get it all back." You'd have to say yes to that, wouldn't you? Well, here's our guarantee. Investment in the program, listen to them for 60 days. If you haven't doubled your money, if you can't point to something specifically that I say, "Wow, I've already doubled my money and I've only had them for 60 days, then you send them back for a complete refund. You will not regret doing that. Let me leave you with what I think is the most important thought you can have when you're negotiating with people, and it's not, what can I get them to give me? The most important thought you can have when you're negotiating with people is, what could I give them? What could I give them that may be of value to them but wouldn't take away from my position? Because when you give people what they want, they'll give you what you want. Great being with you. Good luck in all your negotiations. Thank you very much. Thank you.